Chapter 1496. Boom! Suddenly, the ground quaked and the mountains shook. Many disciples with lower cultivation levels could not even stand properly. It could be said that the entire Lianyun mountain range was shaking because of this attack. This showed how terrifying the strength of these three people was. However, the aura of these three people was also very chaotic at this moment. It was obvious that they had used up a lot of their strength in this attack. This was especially so for Wenming. As the person controlling the formation, he had to bear the brunt of the other two people's strength. Now he looked very weak. His gentle temperament from before was also gone. Lai Xian could not help but frown when he saw a wisp of black flame shoot out after the door of the tomb opened. When Chang Old Man, who was standing at the side, waved his hand and extinguished the black flame. He said, "This flame is only a small part of Black Fire's main body. This is also the reason why the Lianyun mountain range is shaken." Hearing this, the rest of the people were relieved. However, at the same time, some of them did not look too good. This small flame was only a small part of Black Fire's main body. How powerful would it be? This thought caused fear to well up in the hearts of many disciples. However, when they thought about how their own powerful figures were here, what did they have to be afraid of? Disciples of the Lai Mountain sect, listen up. Follow me into the tomb immediately. Lai Xian also shouted loudly. The next moment he rushed in. Everyone present was very clear that if they could enter the graveyard earlier, their chances of obtaining treasures would be higher. Therefore, with such a huge benefit in front of them, how could they fall behind? Wen Chang Old Man and Wenming looked at each other and smiled. However, their smiles were very helpless. This Lai Xian was really an eccentric person. Wenming felt that he was not in a good state at the moment, so he was not in a hurry to go in. Instead, he waved his hand, and his disciples quickly rushed down and entered in a line. When Xiaoyang saw this, he was ready to take advantage of the situation and follow the group of disciples in. After all, they did not know what was going on at the moment, so it was better to enter the tomb first. If there were any changes, it would be hard to say what would happen after they entered the tomb. Moreover, according to Curifier Soken's original identity, half of Lianyun mountain range was probably his grave. One Chang Old Man cupped his fists and said, "Fellow Taoist Wenming, please rest for a moment. This old man will enter first." Wenming seemed to trust him very much. He nodded and said, "I trust old Mister's character. It's just that although that Xan Lai said that he would join hands with us, he has the ambition of a wolf. Please be on your guard." When Chang Old Man frowned when he heard that. It could be said that Lai Xian was the most ambitious of the three sections. His ambition had always been obvious. He wanted to unify the entire mountain wheel boundary, but he didn't have the strength to do so. It's fine if Xian Lai follows the spirit of the contract. However, if he breaks the contract, we'll join hands and make him spit out everything that he has eaten. After when Chang Old Man finished speaking, he led his disciples into the tomb. Wenming helplessly smiled bitterly and shook his head when he heard this. Who could have imagined that things would develop to such an extent? However, even if they fought against Lai Mountain sect, it would be 2 against 1, and the final result would be that their vitality would be greatly damaged. Wenming didn't think too much about it. He sat cross-legged in the void to recuperate and recover his strength. After all, he didn't know what kind of dangers there would be in the tomb. If he went down rashly and didn't have the strength to deal with them, it would be terrible. Of course, Wenming was more worried that his allies would stab him in the back. Suddenly, Wenming felt a strange aura. He looked up and realized that it was the uniform of his own sect's disciples. However, that was the uniform of King Wu's disciples. He had previously said that those who were below King Wu's level were not allowed to enter the tomb, except for a few people who were selected by him. However, he didn't recognize that person. How could Wenming not be suspicious when he was wearing the uniform of an ordinary disciple but had the cultivation level of King Wu? Where did this thief come from? How dare he fish in troubled waters under my nose? Wen Ming shouted angrily and reached out to grab him. Suddenly, a huge handprint appeared out of thin air and grabbed at Xiaoyang. After feeling the huge pressure coming from behind him, Xiaoyang's expression couldn't help but change slightly. This was really out of his expectations. Wen Ming's heart was actually so meticulous. Now, even if he wanted to continue hiding, it was already impossible for him to do so. Therefore, Xiaoyang made up his mind and prepared to rush to the tomb. After all, it wasn't a wise choice to confront Wen Ming head-on now. The most important thing now was to enter the tomb to find out where Blackfire was. As Wen Ming shouted angrily, his disciples immediately reacted. When they saw that Xiaoyang was about to be caught, they immediately formed a wall with their bodies and prepared to block this unknown intruder. These people who dared to block Xiaoyang were naturally not weak. Every one of them was in the King Wu realm. Xiaoyang didn't dare to hesitate. He shouted angrily, and his body emitted a lot of thunder and lightning. He looked like a thunderball, due to the thunder fruit and inner elixir. Xiaoyang's control of thunder and lightning was not as overbearing as Tianbunu's and Lei Dingyin's, but it was still very easy for him. 1,000 Thunder Realm Cultivator. Wen Ming looked at the iconic thunder and lightning and prepared to use his strong body to forcefully open a path. He couldn't help but frown. The cultivators in the King Wu realm were not very high. Under Xiaoyang's rampage, they were directly sent flying. They couldn't stop him at all. His speed was fast and ferocious. Some cultivators even felt a little guilty when they saw this. They subconsciously opened up a path and didn't dare to stop Xiaoyang at all. However, Wen Ming's capture was not over yet. He was quickly following Xiaoyang. He was only 10 feet away from the tomb door. As long as he jumped down, he could escape. Xiaoyang's determination was also very serious. However, in the next moment, a person blocked his way, and a very strong aura erupted from his body. It's Elder Lu. If he makes a move, he will definitely be able to stop this reckless guy. Xiaoyang looked at the elder and snorted. He no longer suppressed his cultivation. He still didn't look back and continued to charge forward. Chapter 1497. What a reckless brat! As soon as Elder Lu's voice fell, he could feel an extremely powerful aura being emitted from the other party's body. Immediately, he could not help but be greatly alarmed. He did not even understand what was going on, and what kind of situation was this? How did this brat's aura become so powerful in an instant? Could it be that he had been suppressing his strength all this time? Wasn't this person scheming a little too deep? However, Elder Lu's thoughts came to an abrupt end at this point. This was because everything before his eyes turned black and his entire body was sent flying. So what if he was half a step into King Wu's 7th rank? With his strength, he couldn't even withstand a single blow from Xiaoyang. Seeing Xiaoyang jump directly into the deep pit and enter the tomb, Wen Ming couldn't help but frown. Sure enough, there was still a loophole. He didn't expect that someone with ulterior motives would still be able to rush in. He didn't know how many of the disciples had snuck in. Wen Ming suddenly remembered what Wen Chang, old man, said last night. It must be this person. Yesterday, he and Xian Lai couldn't find him. It seemed that his concealment methods were very good. However, at the same time, another doubt appeared in Wen Ming's heart. Since this person's cultivation was so high, his patience was very good. His patience didn't seem like 1,000 Thunder Realm cultivator. However, his entire body could erupt with the power of lightning. In this world, other than the more common 1,000 Thunder Realm cultivators, there probably wasn't anyone else who could do this. After that, Wen Ming shook his head and stopped thinking about all of this. After all, he would also enter the ancient tomb later. At that time, Lai Xian and Wen Chang old man would be in front of him. When that time came, they would attack this brat from the front and back. At that time, it would be difficult for him to escape. After entering the Purifier Soken's tomb, Xiaoyang fled at an extremely fast speed. His attack by Wen Ming had probably caused a lot of commotion. He was also determined to quickly leave the place where this matter originated and then find a place to stay. As for the experts who were a threat to him, Xiaoyang could feel that their auras were getting further and further away from him, so there was nothing to worry about. And these disciples who were advancing step by step could not stop Xiaoyang at all. The more they rushed forward, the more confused they would be. There were even some people who thought that Xiaoyang was rushing to the front just to quickly find his own opportunity. Therefore, those people also started to run wildly. For a time, more and more people joined the ranks, and the scene fell into chaos. The more chaotic it was, the less suspicious it would be. Xiaoyang successfully blended into the crowd. Even though Wen Ming's men had chased after them, when they saw the disciples of the other sects running away in a chaotic mess, they were powerless to continue chasing after them. Not long after, Xiaoyang quietly came to a place where there was no one and took off the other person's Taoist robe. Since he had already been exposed, there was no need to continue hiding. Therefore, how to find the black fire next was still a big problem. However, Xiaoyang also had a little selfishness. That was, there must be a lot of treasures hidden in this huge tomb, and he also wanted to plunder them. At the moment, helping Xiaohu find the black fire was the most important thing. If he could plunder some treasures along the way, it would naturally not be a bad thing. After entering the ancient tomb, Xiaohu became even more excited. He even kept cheering. Xiaoyang was not in a hurry to let Xiaohu out. After all, it was also an extraordinary thing. If it was sensed by some almighty, it would still be a troublesome thing. With Xiaohu sensing, Xiaoyang also quickly moved forward. Now, finding the location of the black fire was the most important thing. Although it was inevitable to encounter some disciples of other sects along the way, it could not be helped. However, those people did not see anything unusual and ignored him. After all, the most important thing now was to find their own opportunities and plunder the magic treasures in the ancient tomb. Who would pay attention to a person who only knew how to run and did not know how to plunder carefully? Although the deeper one went, the better the magic treasures were. If one's strength was not enough, the final result would only be to draw water with a sieve. Therefore, there was nothing to stop. Although many disciples of the mountain wheel world were very greedy, they were also self-aware. Sometimes, greed would only lead to nothing. What's more, this time, the elites of the three sects were all dispatched. Who could guarantee that if they continued to move forward, what kind of difficulties would they encounter? It had to be said that the Lianyan mountain range was very big, and this Blackfire ancient tomb was also very big. It was even very likely that this ancient tomb occupied the entire Lianyan mountain range. As they continued to move forward, suddenly Xiaoyang's path was blocked. Standing in front of him was an old man. When Xiaoyang used his divine sense to look at him, he found him, Wenchang Old Man, King Wu rank 7. I have seen all the experts above rank 7 in the three sects, but I have never seen you. Wenchang Old Man said, and his voice became colder. Xiaoyang chuckled and said, It is this junior's fortune to be able to meet you, elder. After I broke through the Kingwu realm, I went out to travel. I just came back. It's normal that you haven't seen me. It would be best if this matter could be explained away. However, Wenchang Old Man had lived for so many years. How could he be so easily fooled? You little kid, don't try to fool me. Or do you think that I'm easy to fool because I'm old and confused? I think you must have used your divine sense to check us last night. Wenchang Old Man's voice became much gentler at this time. However, his aura was constantly getting stronger. Obviously, he was very wary of Xiaoyang. It had to be said that this old man was really cunning. It was impossible to fool him with words. However, this old man was at least rank 8 in Kingwu realm. It was obviously not a wise thing to fight in such a narrow place. Of course, more importantly, it would waste a lot of time. What's the matter? This old man is right, and you still want to say something? If you are really from the three sects, how could you do such a thing with such a realm? Wenchang, old man's expression was a little mocking. Chapter 1498. Xiao Yang's face darkened as he looked at Wenchang, old man. This sly old fox was indeed very shrewd. No matter what he said, he wouldn't believe him. However, how to pass this stage was still a very big problem. Then Xiao Yang took a deep breath and said calmly, "I'm not from the mountain wheel world, but I know that if you continue to waste time with me, Lai Xan will take all the good things for himself. Since he couldn't fool him, he might as well use benefits to persuade him to leave. After all, many people were thinking of getting what they wanted first before plotting other things." However, Wenchang, old man, laughed when he heard that and said, "You're good at concealing yourself, so it's understandable that you're meticulous. Lai Xan is indeed powerful, but it's not like my son can't restrain him. Let's wait for a while more. When Wenming comes down, you, on the other hand, can't even protect yourself." Xiao Yang's face darkened as soon as he said that. When he put it that way, he really felt a little helpless. He didn't expect the old man to have everything under his control. Xiao Yang even had a terrifying thought. That was that Wenchang, old man, might have been waiting for him at this place. If that was the case, Xiao Yang didn't know what to do with such a troublesome old man. "Looks like you have a card up your sleeve, old man. But if you look at it this way, your power seems to be the greatest. Do you think that Lai Xan will join hands with Wenming to create a subtle balance between the forces of the three sects?" Xiao Yang said with a smile. Wenchang, old man's face changed as soon as he said that. That made sense. Moreover, he was the one who suggested joining forces this time. Lai Xan, who had always been domineering, joined under Wenming's persuasion. There was still room for discussion. "I can tell that you don't belong to the mountain wheel world. Therefore, regardless of what you think, it is not a bad thing to expel an outsider first." Wenchang, old man, sighed and said. Xiao Yang's expression didn't change at all, but it was clear from Wenchang, old man's expression. The alliance of these three sects was most likely because they had ulterior motives. If they could drive a wedge between them, the relationship between the three sects would most likely collapse. It could be said that the alliance between the three gates was a delicate balance. If this balance were to be broken, many things would become difficult to predict. "Little doll, your mouth is indeed very powerful. However, I know that if something that belongs to the mountain wheel world falls into the hands of an outsider, it will be a loss to the mountain wheel world." Wenchang, old man, said sternly. Clearly, Wenchang, old man, thought that their conversation was over. Instantly, Xiao Yang's expression changed slightly. The current situation was indeed very bad. "Then let's fight. Junior may be a realm lower than senior, but if we really fight, I won't be the only one who dies. However, I can't say for sure how many casualties you will suffer," Xiao Yang said as the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. This time, Wenchang, old man's face turned ugly. It could be said that almost all the elites of the three sects were here. If a fight really broke out, the consequences would be very difficult to predict. Wenchang, old man's face turned ugly. However, he was going to back down because of this threat and let an outsider search for treasures in the ancient tomb? Naturally, Wenchang, old man, couldn't accept such an outcome, so he wouldn't give way. "Leave, and I will let bygones be bygones. If you continue to question me, don't blame me for being impolite," Wenchang, old man, said. Hearing this, Xiao Yang instantly understood that if he left, he would be putting himself in danger. Whether or not Wenming was still outside was still unknown. Therefore, no matter what choice he made, he couldn't make any mistakes. It was clear that Wenchang, old man, was currently in a state of hesitation. Xiao Yang didn't say anything else. His aura started to gather and explode. It was impossible for him to leave the ancient tomb, so he could only charge over. As long as Wenchang, old man, was wary, he might open up a path for them. However, once a fight broke out, there was no other way. Wen Chang, Old Man's expression changed when he sensed that Lin Fan's power was increasing and that his body was emitting streaks of lightning. So you are a Thousand Thunder Realm fanatic. No wonder King Wu dared to come alone when he was only a rank 7. However, don't underestimate the Mountain Wheel World and this old man, Wen Chang, Old Man said as he released his aura. Xiaoyang was slightly taken aback that Wen Chang, Old Man treated him as a Thousand Thunder Realm cultivator. However, since he could push the blame to the despicable Thousand Thunder Realm cultivator, it seemed like a good thing. The corners of Xiaoyang's mouth curled up slightly as he said, I am that confident. With that, Xiaoyang turned into a streak of lightning and charged towards Wen Chang, Old Man. He had no other choice but to charge forward. Wen Chang, Old Man couldn't help but frown when he saw the lightning. He felt as if a giant beast was charging towards him. However, Wen Chang, Old Man didn't retreat. He roared and quickly formed a seal with his hands. Suddenly, a light screen appeared in front of him. As the hand seals continued to change, the light screen also became more and more solid. For a time it was like a wall. Crack! Xiaoyang's body was extremely strong, and he directly smashed the light screen into smithereens. Immediately, Wen Chang, Old Man's eyes were filled with astonishment. This young man's body was so terrifyingly strong. It was unbelievable. In the next moment, Wen Chang, Old Man was shocked when he saw Xiaoyang charging forward. He might not be able to block such an attack. He didn't want his old bones to fall apart and let others take advantage of him. Therefore, Wen Chang, Old Man dodged quickly. He didn't choose to fight force with force. However, after Wen Chang, Old Man dodged, he realized that he had fallen into a trap. After the lightning-like attack missed him, it continued to charge into the ancient tomb without any intention of stopping. Chapter 1499. Wen Chang, Old Man revealed a helpless smile when he saw the young man running away. He had always been a scheming person. He did not expect that he would be tricked by a little kid today. He would become a joke if word of this were to spread. Wen Chang, Old Man did not care too much about it. At the same time, he sighed in his heart. At that time, he was also very impulsive and was not afraid of anything. Now that he was old, he began to worry about many things. It was also because of this that Xiaoyang was able to succeed. Wen Chang, Old Man was not angry at all. Instead, he admired this kid a little. How interesting. I want to see where you can run to in this ancient tomb. Wen Chang, Old Man said as he began to sense Xiaoyang's aura. This place was only so big. How far could he run? However, in the next moment, the old man smiled bitterly because he could not sense any aura at all. He knew the reason behind this. He had forgotten that Xiaoyang was very good at hiding his aura. If he wanted to hide from Wen Chang, Old Man, he naturally had his own methods. At this moment, Xiaoyang was getting closer and closer to Blackfire under Xiaohua's guidance. However, there were many wounds on his body. They were all caused by breaking through Wen Chang, Old Man's boundary. However, because his body was strong, there were only scratches. They were not enough to cause a problem. Being able to break through Wen Chang, Old Man's barrier was indeed a gamble for Xiaoyang. However, the final result also showed that his gamble this time was correct, and it was successful. If he really got into a fight with that old man, then the following things would definitely become more troublesome. After all, if they were to fight, the commotion would be very big. When that time comes, it would inevitably attract the attention of others. When that time comes, Xiaoyang would be alone and without help. It would be difficult for him to complete his task. If he could escape and obtain Blackfire, it would be the best outcome for Xiaoyang. Although he didn't know if everything would go as smoothly as expected, he had to try. The closer they got to Blackfire, the more subtle the changes in Xiaohua's excited state began to occur. However, there was also an indescribable sense of fear in it. This made Xiaoyang a little confused. What was going on? However, there was one thing that was certain, and that was the legendary Black Flame was probably even slightly stronger than Little Flame. As a result, Xiaoyang had no choice but to be more cautious. At that time, he would definitely help Lil Flame and steadily devour the Black Flame. After all, Xiaohu had become strong together with him, so he was undoubtedly much more at ease with his companion. After walking for a long time, Xiaoyang also saw a secret room. He directly pushed the door open and entered and saw a person. This person's gaze fell on the dazzling array of magic treasures, and his jaw almost fell to the ground. There were only a dozen magic treasures in this room, but every one of them was a heaven-level magic treasure. This was enough to move people. There were even 2 heaven-level magic treasures. However, one had to know that even a top sect had a limited number of heaven-level magic treasures. Only a few core members could possess a heaven-grade, high-grade magic tool. As for divine-level magic treasures, they were existences that could only be encountered by chance. Immediately, Xiaoyang did not hesitate at all. He raised his hand and directly summoned the heavenly Qin Mountain, and directly took the dozen magic treasures. When the cultivator, who was still in shock, saw that all the magic treasures had suddenly disappeared, he immediately woke up as if he had just woken up from a dream. He turned his head and looked at the smiling Xiaoyang, and immediately burned with anger. Where did this wild brat come from? He actually dared to take away all his magic treasures right under his nose. How could he tolerate this? Brat, let me give you a piece of advice. You better hand over everything. Otherwise, I will not let you walk out of this secret room. As the cultivator spoke, he was instantly filled with anger and killing intent. In front of such a large amount of wealth, it was enough to make people go crazy. As for tearing up the contract, that was something that he would not hesitate to do. Xiaoyang only laughed coldly. His wrist shook, and immediately the silver lightning spear appeared in his hand. A wave of restless lightning energy began to emanate from it. You are not from the mountain wheel world. As the cultivator spoke, he became even more furious and prepared to attack. However, how could Xiaoyang give him the chance? Immediately, Xiaoyang shook his wrist, and instantly, the spear in his hand was like a dragon. The long spear in his hand directly pierced through the cultivator's lower abdomen, catching him off guard. So what if they were in the same realm? Xiaoyang had a top-notch immortal artifact, and with his decisiveness he was able to defeat a third-grade immortal artifact in an instant. The cultivator did not even see how Xiaoyang attacked, and his life force began to dissipate. This caused his eyes to be filled with disbelief and fear. What the hell was going on? Don't find trouble with me. As Xiaoyang spoke, his wrist shook again, and the silver lightning spear returned to his hand. It was useless to reason with him now. Therefore, he could only use his strength to do the talking. Although Xiaoyang did not kill him, it was enough to make the cultivator lose his ability to fight. The cultivator clutched his lower abdomen and slowly fell to the ground. His eyes were filled with fear. He truly felt that death was closing in on him. However, when he saw that Xiaoyang had left, he heaved a sigh of relief. It was as if he saw a ray of hope. Holding the silver lightning spear, Xiaoyang was very satisfied. He did not expect that Tianbianu's upper heaven grade magic treasure would be so easy to use. Xiaoyang could even feel that the silver lightning spear had surpassed the upper heaven grade after being forged by Tianbianu. It was only a step away from becoming a divine grade magic treasure. However, sometimes a step away was an insurmountable gap. Now, Xiaoyang felt that it was a pity. He was not in the Thousand Thunder realm, so he could not use the power of thunder and lightning well. Otherwise, he could still give it a try. Perhaps he could really nurture the silver lightning spear into a divine grade magic treasure. Obviously, he did not have this ability now. Chapter 1500. Of course, this was a matter for the future. At the very least, Xiaoyang felt that it was very good when he used it now. The heaven-level upper grade was already very good, not to mention that it was beyond this category. Then, Xiaoyang continued to move forward under Xiaohua's guidance. After walking for a while, he found a room that stored ancient books. He didn't have time to see what grade they were, so he kept them all. Although these skills might not be very useful to Xiaoyang, they were very important to the Northern Lights. The variety of skills could also determine the development of a force. Xiaohua's senses were getting stronger and stronger, but his initial excitement were diminishing. In fact, there was even a trace of fear in his heart. This made Xiaoyang's emotions change slightly. How powerful was black fire? Xiaohua, who had always been proud and arrogant, was a little afraid. Back then, Xiaohua even dared to fight heavenly fire without any fear. Now, Xiaoyang's heart had also become a little heavier. From the looks of it, it was indeed not an easy task to subdue the black flame. Therefore, it was necessary for him to put in more effort in order to achieve this. Therefore, Xiaoyang was under a lot of pressure. Now, not only did he have to suppress black fire, but he also had to face many powerful opponents in the mountain wheel world. However, the arrow had already been knocked on the bow. Now that he had come this far, there was naturally no chance for him to retreat. On the other side, the various almighties of the mountain wheel world were also leading their disciples forward, constantly collecting the treasures in the ancient tomb. In fact, many people had also obtained their own opportunities, which had greatly improved the strength of the three gates. Many people were immersed in the joy of this harvest. Lai Xian was the first person to enter the ancient tomb. At the same time, he was also wandering inside. However, he didn't get much because there were too few things that could catch his eye. This made him very dissatisfied. There was no need to make such a big fuss over such a harvest. Of course, Lai Xian knew very well that the things he had found so far could only be described as mediocre. The main event was the inheritance of Purifier Soken. Rumor had it that the Purifier Soken had made a name for himself with many magic tools and martial arts techniques. If he could get his hands on them, his strength would definitely increase by a lot. Of course, if he could obtain his inheritance, it would be even better. If Blackfire could also subdue it, then it would be a fruitful journey for Blackfire. This was also the goal that Lai Xian had set for himself. He could give up everything else, but he was determined to get the inheritance and the black fire. This was also the reason why Lai Xian was the first to rush into the ancient tomb. However, after entering the ancient tomb, he could not sense where black flame was. There was no aura at all. Lai Xian was like a headless fly in this ancient tomb, wandering around aimlessly. He was also looking forward to when he would be able to find the inheritance of the black fire before the other three. At this time, Wen Ming, who had entered the ancient tomb a little later, also met Wen Chang, old man, on the way. After the two of them met, they smiled at each other and walked side by side, chatting and laughing. In fact, the two of them had a tacit understanding that it was enough for the younger generation to fight for the things here. At their level, the only thing that could catch their attention was the black flame inheritance. As for the rest, it would depend on their own abilities to fight for it. As long as one side did not break the rules, they would not make a move. This method could also make the disciples of their respective sects more determined, and they would become stronger at all costs. I didn't manage to stop that intruder. Wen Ming sighed and said helplessly, it could be said that Xiaoyang was unlucky to have sneaked into Wen Ming's sect. Otherwise, it would have been really difficult to find him. After Wen Chang, old man, heard this, he also smiled bitterly and helplessly. When Wen Ming saw the expression on the old man's face, his eyebrows twitched slightly as he thought of another possibility. After he entered the ancient tomb, I sensed it. However, I wasn't sure if he was Lai Xian's external aid. Wen Chang, old man, said helplessly. He thought of how Lai Xian threw a tantrum when he returned from his fruitless search. However, if he was really Lai Xian's man, he would not have resorted to such means. When Wen Ming heard this, he raised his head abruptly. If that was the case, this matter would be interesting. This little fellow is very quick-witted and full of drive. When he charged at me with all his might, I was afraid that my old bones would fall apart. So I did not stop him and let him escape. Now that I think about it, I am really old and afraid of trouble. Wen Chang, old man, sighed as he said this. Wen Ming looked at the old man and frowned slightly. Thousands of years ago, this old man was also an all-powerful existence in the mountain wheel boundary. Now he gave off the feeling of a hero past his prime. Do you know, that little guy was prepared to drive a wedge between us. He said that there were 2 people in my sect who could fight against you and Lai Xan. Therefore, he said that you and Lai Xan would work together to get rid of me, the strongest existence, Wen Chang, old man, said and laughed. Wen Ming's expression changed when he heard this. Wen Chang, old man's words were obviously the best way to test if Wen Ming was up to something. However, he did not even look at him. Xiao Yang quickened his pace along the way because Xiao Hu's guidance was enough to save him a lot of detours. However, because of some gains, Xiao Yang had to slow down his pace. For example, he would collect all the artifacts, cultivation methods, and ancient books that he came across. At the same time, Xiao Yang also found a few places where elixirs were stored. However, due to the passage of time, most of these elixirs had lost their original medicinal effects. The remaining ones were also reduced by half. Xiao Yang found 3 elixirs that could increase one's strength. Because they were precious items, they were stored very well. In addition, their grades were not low, so the medicinal effects were not dissipated much. Although he did not find black fire, Xiao Yang's gains were still quite bountiful. There was no sense of time in the mountains. Xiao Yang had no idea how long he had been in the tomb. Purifier Soken Palace. When Xiao Yang saw the huge stone plaque, he stopped in his tracks. His heartbeat quickened. All the good things must be here. Chapter 1501. When Xiao Yang was about to push open the door, he hesitated because he didn't know what was behind the door. He didn't know if there was any mechanism behind the door. This made him unsure of what was going on. However, Xiao Yang wasn't an indecisive person. He couldn't sense what was going on behind the door. Only Xiao Hu could sense the existence of black fire. Immediately, Xiao Yang pushed open the door. What entered his eyes was darkness. There wasn't any light in the hall. It was filled with a gentle aura. There wasn't any decay or violence that belonged to black fire. Suddenly, a white smoke drifted over. Xiao Yang subconsciously activated his poison skill. He didn't know if there was poison hidden in the smoke. However, since he had come this far, he had to be careful. However, the white smoke didn't approach Xiao Yang. Instead, it formed a picture in the hall. Xiao Yang saw the Lianyun mountain range and the entire mountain wheel boundary. It looked very beautiful. There were ancient trees everywhere. Insects and birds were chirping. Butterflies were flying by. On the ground, a child was trying to catch a butterfly that was flying around. The child was making threatening gestures. It looked very lively and heartwarming. Suddenly, the smoke trembled, and a black flame suddenly appeared. It was very small at first, but it was burning an ancient tree. The black flame also looked very strange. It must be the legendary black flame. As the black fire burned the ancient tree, it grew stronger. As time passed, the black fire grew stronger. It almost spread to half of the Lianyun mountain range. For a moment, birds and beasts were fleeing. However, as long as the beasts touched the black fire, they were burned to ashes. The original harmony was broken at this moment. Countless butterflies and birds were swallowed by the black fire. Even the child wasn't spared. The almighty beings from the mountain wheel world kept appearing. The small flame had now spread across half of the Lianyun mountain range. How could anyone not be moved? However, the attacks of these powerful beings were unable to extinguish the black flames. Instead, some of the people who accidentally came into contact with the black flames were quickly swallowed up. At the same time, Xiao Yang also discovered that the black fire was becoming more and more powerful because it had devoured many living beings. Many almighties unleashed their special skills to temporarily suppress the black fire, preventing it from causing large-scale damage. However, black fire was very cunning. Those birds and beasts scattered the flames everywhere. A single spark could start a prairie fire. Now, not only the Lianyun mountain range, but almost half of the mountain wheel world was suffering from the black fire. Suddenly, countless families were torn apart. Under the burning of the black fire, it could be said that the people were in a terrible situation. The originally beautiful mountain wheel world was also in a state of devastation. Xiaoyang was shocked to see this. He didn't expect the mountain wheel world to experience such a disaster before this. Now that Xiaoyang knew the origin of the black fire, he could imagine that it wasn't a kind person. It wouldn't be easy to subdue it. At this moment, Xiaoyang's heart was also retreating. This was because if he forcefully subdued the black fire and accidentally let out a small flame, it could cause the calamity of the black fire tens of thousands of years ago to happen again. By then, the entire mountain wheel world would be in deep trouble. Xiaoyang was naturally very passionate about opportunities. However, how could he bear to let the people in the world suffer for his own opportunity? At this moment, the smoke also gradually dispersed. Flames also rose in the large hall, illuminating the interior. Xiaoyang looked up and saw that the hall was very simple. It could be said that there was nothing in it. There was only a huge stone seat at the top. On the stone seat sat a person. That person was wearing a white robe. However, the robe was embroidered with black flames. Under the robe wasn't a pile of bones. Instead, it was a very handsome young man. From these characteristics, it was enough to conclude that this person was probably the Purifier Soken. That person looked very lifelike. Could it be that the Purifier Soken wasn't dead yet? However, Xiaoyang quickly shook his head. If that was the case, how could he have stayed in this eerie graveyard for tens of thousands of years? However, he didn't know how he maintained this form. At this moment, the Purifier Soken suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Xiaoyang. It was as if he had come back from the dead. Instantly, Xiaoyang was shocked and subconsciously took a step back. This was a zombie. Little guy, I didn't expect the fated person to be you. The Purifier Soken said. The Purifier Soken's tone was very gentle. There was no trace of hostility in it. Junior Xiaoyang is from the drifting cloud realm. Greetings, Purifier Soken. Xiaoyang said and bowed with his fists cupped. Xiaoyang still had a lot of respect for the senior from 10,000 years ago. Today, I was greedy for an opportunity. That's why I disturbed senior's resting place. I hope you won't take offense. Xiaoyang continued. The Purifier Soken only smiled and said, Young people are very polite. You and I naturally have a tacit understanding about these things. When I was young, I did many of these things as well. The corner of Xiaoyang's mouth twitched slightly. These things were indeed tacit understanding, but it didn't feel right for the tomb owner to say this to a tomb raider. You don't have to feel guilty. After all, I did these things before. Naturally, I know. That's why my real body isn't here. I'm sure even my ashes are gone now. As the Black Fire Sage spoke, he appeared to be very calm. It was as if he was reading from a script, without the slightest emotion. Xiaoyang was a little taken aback by such a straightforward senior. He did not know what exactly was going through the senior's mind. Of course, it could also be that the Purifier Soken had seen through too many things. That was why he was so calm and emotionless. You don't have to be confused. My body came from the Skywater secret technique. My real body won't rot. That's not something I can do. As for why I can talk to you now, that's because I left a trace of my consciousness behind. The Purifier Soken said calmly. The Purifier Soken didn't discriminate against this young man who wasn't from the Mountain Wheel realm. Instead, he patiently explained the reason behind it. Chapter 1502. Looking at the Black Fire Sage, Xiaoyang's brows furrowed slightly. What kind of obsession could allow him to preserve a trace of his divine soul until now and not completely dissipate? Suddenly, Xiaoyang thought about the volcanic eruption caused by the black fire. However, after the eruption, the black fire disappeared without a trace. Why did that happen? It was still up to him to figure it out. You're right. The tomb door is an opening that I designed. I can't maintain this divine sense for too long. Therefore, I have to find someone who can accept my inheritance as soon as possible, the Purifier Soken said with a hint of sadness in his eyes. Originally, the Purifier Soken wanted to wait for someone to discover the secret behind it. However, that person didn't appear. Therefore, he had no choice but to use the switch that he designed to lure those experts here. Since the Purifier Soken could control the black fire, it was easy for him to leave traces of the black fire at the place where the incident happened. The black fire was extremely cunning. If it was released, it could poison living beings to strengthen itself. Therefore, the black fire wasn't the real cause of the volcanic eruption. Then where is the black fire? Xiao Yang asked the question that was on his mind. The little guy actually got to the point directly. The corners of the black fire sage's mouth curled up into a smile. Even though there was only a divine sense left, he could feel how powerful the other party was. The black fire is behind me. I've imprisoned it. Originally, I thought that I could use the formation to reduce its power and destroy it completely one day. However, it seems that it won't work at all. Therefore, I need someone who can control the black fire, the Purifier Soken said. Hearing these words, Xiao Yang's eyebrows furrowed slightly. Controlling the black flames was something that he had never thought of before. However, after seeing the shocking scene, he knew that the black fire was a scourge. If it wasn't controlled, the entire Mountain Wheel world would be in deep trouble. I can feel that you're stronger than when I tamed the black fire. However, taming the black fire isn't just a matter of strength, the Purifier Soken said helplessly. Xiao Yang's lips curled up slightly. Although he had received the Purifier Soken's approval, he knew that this was the case. There were some things that couldn't be subdued with mere fists. The Purifier Soken's strength back, then, was undeniable. However, it wasn't without reason that he was able to stand out. The black fire is cunning and greedy. If it finds a chance, it will kill its master. Then, it will greedily devour everything to make itself stronger. After that, it will burn the entire Mountain Wheel world and even the entire star region. Given enough time, it will burn everything to ashes, the Purifier Soken said. Xiao Yang smiled and said, although the black fire is strong, it was still tamed by you. Xiao Yang didn't doubt the black fire's strength and growth potential. However, it was still tamed, so it wasn't as unruly as before. That's true. Back then, I only met a newly grown black fire, so it was easy to tame it. However, tens of thousands of years have passed. I can't predict how cunning the black fire has become. Moreover, I was lucky to be able to tame it back then. When I was old, the black fire suffered a backlash. It was after that I sealed it here, the Purifier Soken said helplessly. Originally, he had told the people in the mountain sect that if there were any geniuses, they could accept his inheritance and tame the black fire. However, there was a shortage of geniuses in the mountain sect. His sect was now a second-rate sect, and even the inheritance of the black fire was forgotten. Now, Xiao Yang understood that he couldn't work with the black fire. After all, it was a tiger and a wolf. Keeping it by his side would be a hidden danger. Fortunately, he had Xiao with him. Therefore, this problem could be easily solved. Then, what I'm worried about is how to obtain the black fire, Xiao Yang said with a smile. This was the question he was concerned about. He had enough confidence in Xiaohua. As long as he could control it, he could help Xiaohua destroy the black fire. When the Purifier Soken heard this, he laughed. Young people nowadays were really anxious. He didn't try his best to deal with the black fire, so he didn't know how terrifying it was. This was normal. However, it was normal for young people to be ambitious. What do you plan to do after you obtain the black fire? The Purifier Soken asked straightforwardly. Now, the Purifier Soken was also looking forward to an answer that would satisfy him. He wanted to be able to let go of the last trace of obsession in his heart so that he could leave this world in peace. After thinking for a while, Xiao Yang stretched out his hand. With a thought, a small flame appeared in his hand. I'm sure that Senior can feel that my flame is comparable to a high-grade heavenly fire. It came from devouring heavenly fire, Since the black fire is a source of trouble, then it should be completely destroyed. Since it likes to devour, then it should be devoured, Xiaoyang said with certainty. If Xiaohua could devour the black fire, then its strength would definitely be greatly improved. Looking at the flickering flame, the purifier Soken's eyes lit up. This wasn't impossible. In fact, it could reduce the black fire's strength even more than the formation he used. The purifier Soken was a little tempted. Soon after, the expression in his eyes changed. He said, "Your flame is indeed not bad. However, if the black fire takes over, then its strength will increase tremendously." Hearing this, Xiaoyang's eyebrows furrowed slightly. It wasn't impossible, but Xiaoyang was determined not to let such a thing happen. "I'll help Xiaohua," Xiaoyang said firmly. The purifier Soken nodded slightly. Although he could sense that there were a few people in the tomb who were stronger than Xiaoyang, their attributes were all different. However, the purifier Soken felt that Xiaoyang's method of dealing with the black fire was very feasible. The black fire was a scourge after all. It had to be completely eradicated. Otherwise, as long as there was a slight possibility that something might happen, the consequences would be unpredictable. If that's the case, then as long as you can defeat me, you can accept my inheritance and obtain the black fire, the sage said with a serious expression. Chapter 1504. Xiaoyang's eyebrows twitched when he heard the voice. Black fire was intelligent and could even speak. This was enough to show how terrifying this thing was. It was no wonder the purifier Soken was so anxious. "Beast, your new master is here. Hurry up and bow down." The purifier Soken scolded. At this moment, the stone door was completely open. Xiaoyang could finally see black fire's full appearance. Black fire's flames were rising continuously in the secret chamber. However, it was obvious that it was very weak, as if it would be extinguished at any time. There were dozens of white chains that looked very strange. They were interspersed in the secret chamber and were engraved with many strange runes. These chains must be the instruments used to imprison black fire. Cracks could be seen on the chains. It was obvious that they would not be able to hold on for long. It was also because of this that the purifier Soken was so anxious to find a successor to imprison black fire, who was about to break out of the seal. When black fire heard this, he snorted in disdain and said, "Old man, you are really old and muddle-headed. If I had not fallen into your trap, how could I have submitted to you? I have served you for thousands of years, and you have imprisoned me for tens of thousands of years. It's time for you to let me out. As for the new master, don't worry, I will devour him." After saying that, black fire also laughed. However, his laughter was very strange. When Xiaoyang heard this, his expression changed slightly. This black fire was really not easy to tame. Such arrogance, he was indeed a worthy opponent. At the same time, Xiaoyang could sense Xiaohua's emotions. He was a little afraid, but of course he was more excited. If he could devour the black fire, then Xiaohua's power would increase to a great extent. When the purifier Soken heard this, his face was full of displeasure. Black fire was really too arrogant. If it wasn't for this, purifier Soken would never have thought of completely destroying it. Black fire was born arrogant and untamed. Only after it was subdued by the true Lord did it realize that it had fallen into a trap. He had always been resentful, and the resentment in his heart had accumulated more and more. Therefore, if the purifier Soken went there, it would have nothing to fear. It was also because of this that purifier Soken realized that passing down the black flame was akin to digging one's own grave. The most important thing was to find a way to completely destroy it. Otherwise, all living beings in the world would be plunged into misery and suffering. It could be said that purifier Soken had spent all his remaining time on this matter, but he failed in the end. "Black fire, your end is here. Why are you still so arrogant?" The purifier Soken said coldly. Black fire laughed disdainfully and said, "Even an old man like you can't do anything to me. Xiao Bai's face may be strong, but it will only become my nourishment." Xiaoyang, who was standing by the side, also laughed bitterly. At the same time, he was calculating how powerful black fire was. "After fighting for so many years, there's no need for us to continue fighting with you. I'll wait for you on the road to the underworld." The Purifier Soken shook his head helplessly and said it was impossible for him to not have any feelings for black fire after 10,000 years. However, the true monarch also had to face reality. Without him, the black fire would have no restrictions. At that time, it would cause immeasurable consequences. That was something that could not be predicted. Therefore, the only way was to destroy it. Black fire still looked disdainful and said, "You're just a remnant soul left. I just need some nourishment, and I'll be strong again." The true Lord smiled at Black Fire's words, but did not say anything. "Xiaoyang, you've seen for yourself what kind of character this beast has. With it, as long as it's ambitious enough and nourishes enough, it'll be invincible. At the same time, it's hard to tame. Therefore, the only way is to destroy it. When the time comes, no matter what it says to you, don't be fooled by its huge benefits. You'll only be able to control it if you're stronger than it. Even I was attacked in my later years," true monarch Blackfire said with a hint of helplessness in his eyes. If Blackfire was more docile, it could benefit the entire Mountain Wheel world. However, it was decided from the moment it was born that it would be the beginning of its destruction. Xiaoyang nodded helplessly and said, "Senior, I admire you for being able to tame Black Fire so decisively back then." Back then, the calamity of Black Fire engulfed half of the Mountain Wheel world. It was obvious how terrifying it was. If it wasn't for the Purifier Soken, this beast might have devoured the entire small world. Of course, he was serious about his admiration. No wonder he was called a true lord. "Are you ready?" the true lord asked. Xiaoyang nodded solemnly. He had to make a choice now. Moreover, after seeing the nature of Blackfire's original body, he was eager to get rid of this beast as soon as possible. Then Xiaoyang summoned Xiaohua and asked him to try to devour Blackfire. Although Xiaohua couldn't devour Blackfire directly, he could slowly erode it. Moreover, now that Blackfire was imprisoned, it was a great opportunity for them. Although Xiaohua was afraid, he was more excited. In the next moment, he pounced on Blackfire. "How dare you be so presumptuous? Since you want to become my nourishment, then come at me directly." Blackfire let out a terrifying laugh as he spoke. However, Xiaohua was very smart. He started to absorb Blackfire's aura outside the secret room. Then, the true lord waved his hand, and a wisp of black fire appeared in his hand. Looking at the burning flame in the true lord's hand, Xiaoyang frowned slightly. Feeling it up close made him feel more realistic. If this thing were to be used on him, the consequences would be unpredictable. However, since he had come this far, how could he back down? Then, the true lord directly sent black fire into Xiaoyang's sea of consciousness. Instantly, Xiaoyang's entire body trembled as he stood there in a daze. In the sea of consciousness, Xiaoyang was being burned mercilessly by black fire. At the same time, Xiaoyang also felt that his sea of consciousness was being devoured by black fire. Obviously, the black flames could devour anything. Because of this, the flames gradually became stronger. In an instant, the pain made Xiaoyang very clear-headed. He didn't dare to hesitate and immediately started to protect himself. He also used the fire-controlling art to control it. Chapter 1505. Seeing that Xiaoyang had already entered the zone, the true lord did not relax at all. He still had a worried look on his face. This was because he did not know if this junior could succeed or how far he could go. If he could not control black fire, he would be completely devoured and the consequences would be unimaginable. Black fire would naturally become stronger as a result. By then, even if the perfected lord wanted to control everything, he would be powerless. Although the perfected lord was very optimistic about Xiaoyang, this method was still like a gamble. If he did not succeed, the consequences would be unpredictable. Of course, the perfected lord still felt that the chances of success were very high. After all, it was difficult to find the reason why Blackfire would fail with such a powerful soul power. Beside him, Xiaohua also greedily devoured the aura of the black flame. His speed also became faster and faster. After adapting to the pressure, Xiaohua also gathered his courage and entered the secret room. He began to try devouring the edge of the black flame. Due to being restrained by the iron chain, Blackfire could not move and could only be slaughtered. However, Blackfire was not so easy to devour. After swallowing a few mouthfuls, Xiaohua's speed slowed down, and it seemed to be very difficult. After all, this wasn't a simple matter. It wasn't easy to do it. Old man, look at this little thing. It doesn't even dare to take a big bite of my edge. At this speed, it won't be able to devour me even if it takes 10,000 years. Or perhaps when it reaches my mouth, it can only be swallowed by me. Blackfire chuckled as he spoke. In Blackfire's opinion, if he could devour this strange flame, his strength would also usher in an increase. At least, breaking the seal would not be a problem. However, the human standing outside was a troublesome matter, so Blackfire had to think of a way to eliminate him. After all, if he really obtained the perfected lord's inheritance, he would also have a way to subdue him. The perfected lord smiled very nonchalantly and said, Blackfire, you came to destroy, but you are stubborn. Don't blame me for being ruthless. Then, the perfected lord sighed helplessly. Such an outcome was indeed something he did not wish to see, but it was something he had to do for the sake of the world. Although Blackfire now had spiritual intelligence, its nature was deeply ingrained and could not be changed. Therefore, it could be destroyed. As for the growth of Blackfire, the true Lord was very clear in his heart. As long as he was given enough nourishment, it would not be a problem for him to unify the world. However, at that point, this world would have been completely devoured, and all that would be obtained would be nothing more than nothingness. The price he would have to pay would be the entire world. What was the point of doing that? At that time, everything would turn into nothingness, and he would lose his footing. Heartless? Haha, old man, you really know your own conduct. You want to destroy me with just this? Aren't you being too optimistic? Blackfire was also indifferent to Xiaohua's actions. He didn't even look at Xiaohua. All his attention was on the monarch. Although they had been friends for tens of thousands of years, Blackfire hated the true monarch more. After Blackfire was tamed, he was forced to do so. In addition, the true lord was targeting and restricting him, which made Blackfire feel resentful. Originally, he could be considered the supreme existence between heaven and earth, but now he was imprisoned here. In fact, its master was also thinking about how to destroy it at this moment. How could Blackfire accept this? It's useless for you to say anything now. I only hate that I can't destroy you with my own hands, the true lord said helplessly. He did not have that kind of ability, so he could only ask for help. Looking at Xiaoyang, who was in pain, Purifier Soken's brows furrowed even more. This was because he sensed that someone else was coming. However, he did not know what kind of attitude the other party would have. However, with one more person, there might be more variables here. After a while, the true lord saw the first person who came. He looked like a middle-aged man who gave off a very valiant feeling. The person who came was Lai Xan. He was the first to enter the cemetery. He did not have any guidance, so he could only run around like a headless fly. It was not until Blackfire's aura spread that he hurried over. However, the moment he saw Purifier Soken, he was stunned. This was because Lai Xan felt that everything in front of him was very unreal. Lai Xan had seen Purifier Soken's portrait in the past. It could be said that it was almost exactly the same. It was as if the true lord was alive. Purifier Soken? Lai Xan stuttered. Although Lai Xan was arrogant, he also knew that this famous senior from tens of thousands of years ago was right in front of him. How could he not feel the slightest ripple in his heart? His purpose this time was very clear. He wanted the Blackfire's inheritance, and Blackfire. Now that the true Lord was right in front of him, how could he not feel emotional? Purifier Soken smiled very gently and said, "That's right, I am." At this time, Lai Xan subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. What was happening in front of him was completely beyond his expectations. The true Lord had been alive for tens of thousands of years. Why was he hiding in the cemetery? One question after another made Lai Xan realize that this matter was not as simple as it seemed. After a while, Wen Chong Old Man and Wen Ming walked in together. When they saw Purifier Soken's true appearance, they were very excited. This was also something that they did not expect. Purifier Soken could be said to be the only true lord in the Mountain Wheel world. If it were not for him, the Mountain Wheel world would have been destroyed by the Black Fire. Looking at this savior-like existence, their expressions became very excited. It could be said that in the Mountain Wheel world, even the ordinary people would worship and worship Purifier Soken at home. Now that the true Lord was right in front of them, the impact and shock in their hearts could be said to be very high. Seeing that the strength of these juniors had reached the peak of the 8th rank, the true Lord was very gratified in his heart. It was just that he thought more highly of the young man Xiaoyang, so he gave his inheritance to Xiaoyang. After all, Xiaoyang had the means to destroy the Blackfire. It was to prevent future troubles, not a temporary solution. Chapter 1506. Ah, it's really lively today. There are actually so many people here. He, whose tone was also filled with a strange feeling. When the perfected Lord heard this, he frowned slightly. He knew how cunning Blackfire was. If Blackfire used any tricks, he might be able to escape without a trace. Therefore, he had to be careful now. "Greetings, perfected Lord." Wen Chong Old Man and Wen Ming knelt down and greeted him. The true monarch reached out his hand and supported him. It could be said that most people in the Mountain Wheel boundary worshipped Purifier Soken. In fact, that kind of worship could be described as fanaticism. How could Wen Chong Old Man and Wen Ming not be excited when they saw the godlike figure in their hearts? The perfected Lord smiled satisfactorily when he saw the two juniors, who were well-mannered and powerful. The current Mountain Wheel boundary seemed to be doing well. This made the true monarch feel much more at ease. What a touching scene! If you knew that the old man's inheritance had been given to that young man, would you still be in such a good mood? Blackfire said cheerfully at this moment. His tone was full of mockery and playfulness. Blackfire's intention was very obvious. He wanted to stir up trouble. That was the only way he could escape. Sure enough, after Blackfire said that, the expressions of the three of them changed slightly. Among them, Lai Xian's reaction was the most intense. His eyes seemed to be about to explode as he stared at Xiaoyang. The three of them had put in so much effort to come here for Purifier Soken's inheritance. But now, it had been taken away by an outsider. How could they feel good about it? The perfected Lord's expression turned ugly. He wanted to reprimand Blackfire, but he no longer had the strength to do so. After giving his inheritance to Xiaoyang, the remaining strength of his spiritual soul was very weak. Wen Chong Old Man and Wen Ming looked at the perfected Lord in confusion. They could not understand his actions. On the other hand, Lai Xian felt a trace of hatred in his heart. They were the ones who tried their best to open the tomb door, but an outsider wanted to obtain the inheritance of the Mountain Wheel boundary. How could he accept this? However, Lai Xian didn't dare to act rashly because he knew who he was facing. It was Purifier Soken, a legendary existence in the Mountain Wheel world. How could he dare to act rashly? Wen Chong Old Man and Wen Ming were also extremely unhappy, but they couldn't understand why the true monarch would give his inheritance to an outsider. Of course, the true monarch had his own reasons for doing this. However, he didn't feel good about the fact that he had made a wedding dress for someone else. This old fellow is just a wisp of his spirit. He is extremely weak now and can't reach the apex. You don't have to be afraid of him at all. Blackfire continued to speak slowly. These words made Lai Xan's eyebrows twitch slightly, but the other two did not. Even if the true lord was just a wisp of soul, they could not attack. It was respect and worship that came from the bottom of his heart. Shut up! The true monarch was a little angry now. The true monarch knew very well that Blackfire was good at provoking people. If he allowed Blackfire to continue speaking, he really didn't know what would happen. However, the true monarch's scolding was useless because Blackfire didn't worship the true monarch. In fact, he even resented him. In fact, he couldn't wait for the true monarch to die so that he would feel better. If I were you, I wouldn't watch the inheritance be taken away by someone else. He's just an outsider. It'll be embarrassing if he takes away the inheritance. Besides, if you can kill him and take his spirit, you might be able to gain something. Blackfire continued to speak slowly at this moment. Hearing this, Lai Xan suddenly raised his head and looked at Xiaoyang. Although he wouldn't attack the true monarch, the outsider who got there first was indeed not qualified to obtain the inheritance. Therefore, if he died, they would still be able to gain something. When he thought of this, Lai Xan's expression changed drastically. If you continue to hesitate, you'll miss a good opportunity. Xiaoyang is now affected by my flames and can attack. Later, when he comprehends the Imperial Fire technique, you won't be his opponent. Blackfire also said, very slyly, in Blackfire's opinion, as long as Xiaoyang died, the Imperial Fire technique would naturally be lost. In this way, no one would be able to control it, and it would naturally be able to do whatever it wanted. Hearing this, Lai Xan's eyes suddenly lit up. He immediately moved and rushed toward Xiaoyang. As long as he killed Xiaoyang, everything would not be a foregone conclusion. This was still something that could be changed. That young man had suddenly interfered. Based on this point alone, he had already committed a capital crime that could not be avoided. Therefore, he had to die. Now, Lai Xan had also made up his mind. Seeing this, the true monarch was shocked and immediately attacked. Xiaoyang was at the critical moment of comprehending the Imperial Fire technique and was being affected by the black flames. How could he be affected at all? This was the true monarch's only hope for the Mountain Wheel world. He did not want to see anything happen to him, so he was very decisive in his attack. Hope could not be destroyed just like this. Lai Xan attacked with his palm, but when he saw the true monarch in front of him, he immediately retracted his palm and retreated. Now, Lai Xan still could not attack the true monarch who he worshipped so much. Blackfire was originally very happy, but when he saw this scene, he was also very unhappy. This old man had to admit that he had some prestige. How troublesome. True monarch, why did you give the inheritance to an outsider? Lai Xan was also very unhappy in his heart and asked loudly. Looking at this irritable young man, the true monarch shook his head helplessly and said, "You should know about the disaster of the black flames. I just don't want such a disaster to happen again. That's why I did this." Huh. He's an outsider. He's only King Wu's level 7. Do you think we level 8 can't beat him? Lai Xan also asked very angrily. This kind of feeling made him very unhappy. The true monarch was also very helpless because sometimes the level of cultivation did not mean everything. When he subdued Blackfire, his level was more than 100 times higher than his, but he was still helpless. Chapter 1507. The perfected lord did not know how to answer Lai Xan's question. After all, it would be very troublesome to explain in a short period of time. Moreover, he only needed to delay for a long enough time. That would be enough. As long as Xiaoyang could familiarize himself with the Imperial Fire art, that would be enough. Wen Chong old man and Wen Ming did not say anything. They were also waiting for an answer. Although their hearts made it impossible for them to ask such disrespectful questions, they still wanted to know the answer. What was the reason for all of this? However, the perfected lord did not have any intention of speaking. This made the three of them very anxious. Why did he think so highly of this young man? If he can do it, why can't we? Lai Xian asked again. His tone was full of dissatisfaction. The perfected lord shook his head and said, "Your strength is indeed not bad, but that young man is undoubtedly the most suitable existence." Wen Chong old man and Wen Ming shook their heads when they heard this. They also recalled the records of Blackfire's calamity. If that was the case, it was understandable. However, they still felt a little indignant. When Lai Xen heard this, he felt that the perfected lord was looking down on him. This made Lai Xen feel even more upset and resentful. "What do you mean by not suitable?" "It's just that the old man is biased," Blackfire continued to say, not bothering to blow up the matter. In Blackfire's opinion, the bigger the matter, the better. As long as it blew up, it would have a chance to escape from this prison. Then no one would be able to stop it from doing whatever it wanted to do. This was Blackfire's plan. It had racked its brains to escape from this place. It could be said that Blackfire's 10,000 years of imprisonment had caused a trace of fear to grow in its heart. When Lai Xian heard Blackfire's fanning the flames, his eyes suddenly flashed with even more ferocity and anger. It seemed like he wanted to kill the perfected lord. After Blackfire sensed the great change in Lai Xian's aura, he was very proud. This meant that he could carry out his plan even better. What a wonderful thing! "Ha ha! Young man, what are you afraid of that old man for? It's just a strand of divine sense that's about to dissipate. As long as you're willing, you can destroy it." Blackfire continued. Now, Blackfire was doing its best to stir up trouble. It knew very well that when a person was angry, anything could happen. Therefore, it only needed to make the situation more tense and watch the humans continue to kill each other. Wen Chong old man and Wen Ming also saw Blackfire, the imprisoned Blackfire. Immediately, the two of them frowned. They understood why it was imprisoned. "I know, you're afraid of being condemned by everyone in the future. But in the future, your prestige will be even higher than the old man's. Who can criticize you?" Blackfire said. The sage looked at Blackfire from the corner of his eye. He was furious, but he knew that this would not solve the problem. "Young man, calm down." The true monarch also earnestly advised. After all, the most important thing right now was not to cause any trouble. Therefore, the true monarch could only smooth things over and did not dare to do anything. However, Blackfire would not give the true monarch such a chance. Instead, it threw out the most tempting words and said, "This old man is just a coward. Young man, believe me, as long as I can free myself, I can continue to become stronger. As long as Xiaoyang is dead, no one can control us. If we join forces, we can conquer the entire mountain will boundary, and even the entire world will be ours. When that time comes, you will be at the peak. The so-called true monarch is just an ant in front of you. Will you feel guilty about killing an ant?" These words gave Lai Xen hope because he knew from the ancient books that the true monarch only became famous after he obtained Blackfire. One could imagine the power of Blackfire. Without Blackfire, would the true monarch still be the true monarch? Lai Xen felt that he would become the second true monarch, or even surpass him, as long as he could obtain Blackfire. "My master, what are you waiting for? Why don't you take action and get rid of our common threat?" Blackfire continued to tempt him. As soon as he said that, Lai Xen laughed. When he heard Blackfire call him master, he felt that he could already see a bright future. Suddenly, Lai Xen launched another attack. He slapped his palm toward Xiaoyang. The true monarch immediately slapped his palm in an attempt to block Lai Xen. However, he was directly sent flying. He was only left with a wisp of his spirit. How could he fight against Lai Xen at his peak? Wen Chong old man and Wen Ming's expressions became extremely unsightly when they saw this. Although they wanted to get a satisfactory answer, they could not understand why Lai Xen would attack the true monarch. Now Blackfire was also very excited. Everything was going according to his plan. What a wonderful thing this was. Immediately, Lai Xen sent Xiaoyang flying with a palm strike. As expected, Xiaoyang did not resist at all. He fell to the ground directly, and no one knew whether he was dead or alive. When the true monarch saw this, his heart was filled with pain. He did not expect the situation to develop to this point. Fortunately, the true monarch sensed that Xiaoyang was not dead. This also made the true monarch even more certain that he had not misjudged Lin Fan. The strength of his body was unimaginable. The two of you must protect Xiaoyang and don't let Blackfire escape. Otherwise, the calamity of Blackfire will spread and the consequences will be unpredictable. Only Xiaoyang has the chance to suppress Blackfire. As the true monarch said this, his voice became extremely weak. At this moment, Wen Chong Old Man and Wen Ming came back to their senses. Lai Xan had actually attacked the true monarch. This was simply disgraceful and heresy. Now, the entire Mountain Wheel world is mine. Haha. Lai Xan laughed wantonly. His ambition was exposed. He had originally wanted to obtain the entire Mountain Wheel world. Who would have thought that there would be a tripartite balance? But now, if he could obtain the Black Flame, then this balance would naturally be broken. Master, let's get rid of our threat first, Blackfire said excitedly. At this moment, the last wisp of the true monarch's spirit dissipated. The heavenly water that was used to forge his physical body had also lost its effect. It turned into a puddle of water that flowed on the ground. Only his robe was left. Chapter 1508. Wen Chong Old Man and Wen Ming were heartbroken when they saw the last wisp of the true Lord's soul dissipating. It could be said that to them, true monarchs were existences akin to faith. However, their faith had collapsed, and even the last strand of their souls in this world had been scattered by others. The person who had done all this was Lai Xan, whom they had joined forces with. This was something that they could not accept. Lord Blackfire was a godlike existence in their hearts, and what Lai Xan had done was treacherous and unfilial. Blackfire was the happiest of them all. The true lord, who had been suppressing him for tens of thousands of years, was finally dead. He had been unable to increase his strength and had been constantly weakening. To Blackfire, this was the happiest thing that had happened in tens of thousands of years. Lai Xan, who had destroyed the last wisp of the true Lord's soul, looked at his hands and smiled crazily. In his opinion, he could even kill the true Lord. If he could kill the god of the Mountain Wheel world, then he would naturally be the newest god. This made Lai Xan's confidence soar to the extreme. If the true Lord was no match for him, then who else in the entire Mountain Wheel world could be his match? Moreover, even Blackfire had submitted to him. Now, Lai Xan felt that it was only a matter of time before he dominated the entire world. It did not matter whether he had obtained the true Lord's inheritance. As long as Blackfire submitted to him, then everything was enough. Then, Lai Xan's gaze fell on Wen Chong Old Man and Wen Ming. It could be said that these two were the ones who had stopped him from dominating the world. They were two great sinners. Wen Chong Old Man and Wen Ming's expressions changed when they felt Lai Xan's gaze on them. They were still angry, but this guy still wanted to attack them? They did not lose their minds because of what they had obtained. They just felt that Lai Xan had to die. Therefore, Wen Chong Old Man and Wen Ming did not communicate at all. They already knew what was going on. Lai Xan, since you destroyed the last wisp of the true Lord's soul, you deserve to die. Wen Chong Old Man shouted angrily. At the same time, Wen Chong Old Man exuded a powerful aura. Although he hadn't fought for 1,000 years this time, even if he had to risk his life, he would kill this treacherous person. Lai Xan looked at Wen Chong Old Man with disdain and said, "Do you think you're my match? Old bastard, I've been tolerating you before, but now I'm going to kill you." What big words! Wen Ming stepped forward as well. Seeing the two of them step forward at the same time, Lai Xan frowned slightly. He was a little more clear-headed now. If the two of them were to join forces, it would not be easy for him to defeat them. Blackfire, who was standing at the side, saw everything clearly. He knew that Lai Xan would definitely be at an absolute disadvantage if he fought two people alone. He said, "Master, as long as you break these chains, I will be free." At that time, wouldn't exterminating these two ants be a piece of cake? Wen Chong old man and Wen Ming's expressions turned ugly when they heard this. If that was the case, they would be in a very bad situation. Blackfire's terror could be seen from the fact that half of the mountain wheel world had been plunged into misery and suffering. Countless experts had died. In the next moment, Lai Xian rushed into the secret chamber. Although Lai Xian was full of confidence now, he was still rational. Indeed, as long as he had Blackfire, how could the two of them be his match? Wen Chong old man and Wen Ming instinctively tried to stop him, but they were too late. In the next moment, Lai Xian rushed into the secret chamber. Even though Xiao Hua tried to stop him, he could not stop him at all. Lai Xian was in a frenzy now. The pain could not stop him. His goal was very clear. As long as his helper, Blackfire, came out, it could be said that the outcome was set. In the next moment, Lai Xian immediately made his move, breaking several chains. Even if he had to destroy a heaven-tier, mid-tier magic treasure, he would not be stingy. Compared to the Blackfire, what did these Dharma treasures count for? Haha, I'm finally free. Although only a few chains were broken, Blackfire's strength was not weak. He broke the rest of the chains and regained his freedom. After Blackfire lost control, he kept wandering around Lai Xian's body. He looked as happy as a child. "Master, let's kill these people who are in the way now," Blackfire said very cruelly. Lai Xian also nodded with a smile. Although he had some injuries on his body, he was still able to endure them. His entire aura had also undergone a great change. Suddenly, Wen Chong old man and Wen Ming's minds went blank. They seemed to have seen the end of the world. Under the power of Blackfire, the mountain wheel world would probably cease to exist. "You annoying flame, I'll swallow you first to recover my strength." Blackfire looked at Xiao Hua and said. Xiao Hua was very smart. He escaped into Xiao Yang's body, leaving no chance for Lai Xian to escape. Wen Chong old man's face turned deathly pale as he looked at the ferocious He Hua. The development of the situation had far exceeded their expectations. No one would have thought that things would turn out like this. Lai Xian, you're really in trouble this time. The entire mountain wheel world will suffer because of this. Wen Chong old man gritted his teeth and said. When Lai Xian heard this, he looked disdainful and said, "Ha, I don't care about the mountain wheel world. Now this world will be mine." Blackfire had the potential. As long as he ate enough, Blackfire would be strong enough. He's crazy. Wen Ming frowned. Wen Chong old man shook his head helplessly and said, "Wen Ming, take Xiao Yang and leave. I'll bring up the rear." Before the Supreme's godly soul dissipated, he had made it clear that Xiao Yang was his hope. After inheriting his legacy, he was the only one who could deal with Blackfire. Therefore, nothing could happen to Xiao Yang. Although Wen Ming was a little hesitant, he understood when he saw Wen Chong old man's eyes. "Master, we can't let Xiao Yang go." Blackfire shouted immediately. At this moment, Lai Xian and Blackfire attacked together and attacked Xiao Yang. 1,000 technique hands. Wen Chong old man roared and attacked with both hands at the same time. Chapter 1509. Wen Ming did not dare to hesitate when he saw Wen Chong old man make a move. He immediately rushed over, grabbed Xiao Yang and rushed out. Boom! Under the flying gravel, Wen Ming brought Xiao Yang out of the graveyard and saw the light again. At this moment, Wen Ming also saw a trace of tears at the corner of Xiao Yang's eyes. Although Xiao Yang was eroded by the Blackfire because he cultivated the Imperial Fire art, it did not mean that he was completely unaware of the outside world. When he heard that the magnanimous perfected Lord had disappeared, his heart was filled with pain. However, he had no choice but to endure it. If he could not completely master the Imperial Fire art, he would not be able to control the Blackfire. After all, there was only a wisp of black fire in his soul. How could he fight against the black fire's main body if he had not extinguished it? Wen Ming did not care so much now. He immediately shouted, "Lai Xian betrayed us and killed the perfected Lord. All disciples, immediately evacuate the perfected Lord's cemetery and the Lianyun mountain range." It could be said that Wen Ming had used all of his strength in this roar. He wanted every disciple to hear this and retreat as quickly as possible. Otherwise, the consequences would be unpredictable and the losses would be immeasurable. Therefore, he could only do this in order to reduce the losses. For a moment, the Lianyun mountain range was constantly shaking. Wen Chang Old Man and Lai Xian had already started fighting. Wen Chang Old Man knew that it would be difficult for him to survive with the help of the black fire. Therefore, he used all his strength and did not hold back at all. Wen Chang Pavilion listened to Sect Master Wen Ming's orders. Wen Chang Old Man roared unwillingly. Now that Lai Xian had the black fire, he would definitely be the dominant force. When that time came, it would be difficult to resist. They could only have a chance of survival if they joined forces. When the disciples of Wen Chang Pavilion heard this, they were very shocked. However, they knew that it was probably as Wen Ming said. Therefore, the situation had reached a very bad point. However, many people were very confused about Lai Xian's betrayal and killing the perfected Lord. However, after a while, many people rushed out of the Lianyun mountain range. Looking at the constantly shaking Lianyun mountain range, they knew that Wen Chang Old Man and Lai Xian were fighting to the death. However, why didn't Wen Ming lend a hand? At this moment, Wen Ming was also running away. He had to get as far away from the Lianyun mountain range as possible. He had to get away from this troublesome place and wait for Xiaoyang to wake up before he could make further plans. It didn't take long for someone to catch up to Wen Ming. The middle-aged man whispered, "Wen Ming, what's going on?" "Wen Kuei, take everyone and leave the Lianyun mountain range. Your father won't be able to hold on for much longer. Everyone come to my sect. When the time comes, I'll slowly explain everything to you," Wen Ming said anxiously. When Wen Ming heard those words, he recalled his father's words and snorted coldly. He immediately turned around and began to command everyone to retreat. Wen Yi knew her father quite well. If it wasn't for the fact that he had no choice but to die, he wouldn't have done this. He didn't know what he had encountered in the true monarch's tomb, but the development of the situation was enough to explain many questions. The tremors in the mountain range became more and more intense. It didn't take long for it to stop. In the ancient tomb, Lai Xian stood there. His eyes were filled with anger. Although he had killed Wen Chang Old Man, he was also severely injured. Furthermore, the strength that black fire had displayed was not as tyrannical as he had expected. "Master, don't underestimate me. I was imprisoned by that old man for 10,000 years. Coupled with the weakening of the array, my strength is naturally not as strong as before. As long as I have some time to recover, it won't be a problem," Blackfire said as he began to erode Wen Chang Old Man's physical body. Wen Chang Old Man was King Wu rank 8. To Blackfire, he was a great tonic. In just a short while, the black flames had completely devoured Wen Chang Old Man's physical body. Immediately, the flames became a lot stronger. A satisfied smile appeared on Lai Xian's face as he watched Black Flame grow stronger. At this rate, Black Fire would become stronger and stronger. "Master, an ordinary King Wu rank 8 is no match for me now," Black Fire said confidently. Black Fire's strength had originally been reduced to King Wu rank 3. However, after devouring Wen Chang Old Man, his strength had soared to rank 8. "Then let's kill them now to prevent any future trouble," Lai Xian said arrogantly. In Lai Xian's opinion, now that Black Fire had reached King Wu rank 8, they would be invincible if they joined forces. Although Wen Chang Old Man was dead, Wen Ming was still alive. "Master, don't be anxious. You should recover from your injuries first. I also need to increase my strength. This is the only way to prevent any accidents," Black Fire said humbly. Light Xian thought for a moment, then nodded and sat on the ground. Black Fire was arrogant to begin with. How could he submit to Light Xian? If he could, Black Fire wanted to devour Light Xian immediately. However, Black Fire had to be wary of Xiaoyang, who was left behind by the perfected lord. Black Fire was so cunning. If Xiaoyang did not die, he would definitely not kill Light Xian. In the next moment, Black Fire quietly spread across the Lianyun mountain range. When Wenming saw the appearance of Black Fire, he was shocked. He thought of the calamity of Black Fire recorded in the ancient books. On the other hand, after Wenming brought Xiaoyang back, he did not dare to act rashly. He could only wait for Xiaoyang to wake up. After a few hours, Xiaoyang's body trembled. His entire body erupted with a powerful aura. Wenming immediately looked up and saw that Xiaoyang had opened his eyes. His entire aura was much stronger than before, because he had merged with the perfected lord's inheritance. Xiaoyang was now half a step away from King Wu rank 8. Although the fire writing art could not be said to be perfect, it was still practiced. As for the black fire that was burning his soul, it was also controlled and devoured by Xiaohua. Of course, the fire writing art could also destroy the black fire. However, a mosquito's leg was still meat, so there was no need to waste it. Thank you for your help, Sect Masterwin. Don't worry, I won't let either Light Xian or Black Fire go, Xiaoyang said coldly. Xiaoyang was now like half a disciple of the perfected lord. How could he not avenge his master? Moreover, he had promised the perfected lord that he would destroy Black Fire. The hatred in his heart could only be washed away with blood. Chapter 1510. Although the death of the perfected lord was only a matter of time, how could Xiaoyang tolerate the fact that the perfected lord had died in the hands of a despicable man like Lai Exen? Even though Xiaoyang wasn't in a good state right now, as he had been seriously injured by the black flames and Lai Exen's palm strike, he still wouldn't be happy if he didn't vent the anger in his heart. Xiaoyang was such a person. In the next moment, he moved and headed towards the Lianyun mountain range. Although he was seriously injured, Xiaoyang's strength had been greatly improved. At the moment, he was very confident. Of course, he was also angry. It was a kind of ambition, a kind of boldness that wanted to cut his enemy into pieces. If he didn't do so, he would feel very uncomfortable in his heart. This was also inseparable from Xiaoyang's character. Originally, when Ming had thought that after Xiaoyang woke up, they would have to discuss this matter at length and figure out how to kill Lai Xian and the Black Fire. However, this young man's cultivation was not as good as his, and he was even seriously injured. Yet he still stood up resolutely. This also caused some of Wen Ming's original plans to be completely disrupted. Could it be that the young people these days had all become boorish and had started to not care about anything? If he rushed up like this, the opponent would be at his peak. Going up to kill him would be suicide. Xiaoyang, are you going to die like this? Wen Ming's body flashed as he blocked Xiaoyang's path. His expression was extremely solemn. Now, only Xiaoyang could control the black fire because he had the imperial fire art. If he went to seek revenge impulsively and died, who else could control the black fire? Back then, Wen Chong old man had resolutely used his life to buy time. It was not without reason. Only Xiaoyang could control the black fire. He was the hope of the mountain wheel realm. He could save the black fire from this disaster. Wen Ming had already sensed that the last bit of Wen Chong old man's aura had dissipated. Therefore, he knew how powerful he was. According to Wen Chong old man's methods, he would definitely try to escape after he escaped from danger. If he couldn't escape, then there was only one possibility, and that was that he couldn't escape at all. Xiaoyang frowned slightly and said, I won't die. However, I know that the more the black fire devours, the stronger it will be. When that time comes, even if I have the imperial fire art, I'm afraid I won't be its match. Now that the black fire has just escaped and is still very weak, it's a great opportunity for us. Immediately, when Ming frowned slightly, he was naturally well aware of this. The longer the battle dragged on, the stronger the black fire would become. At that time, it would not be an easy task to subdue it. For a moment, Wen Ming's heart was very conflicted. He did not know how to make a choice. Seeing that Wen Ming was still hesitating, in the next moment, he quickly went around Wen Ming and continued on his way to the Lianyun mountain range. As for his serious injuries, Xiaoyang consumed a bunch of elixirs and began to forcibly heal his injuries and the damage to his soul. Wen Ming's frown deepened as he shook his head helplessly. Looking at the young man who was charging forward bravely, he immediately shouted, "Seventh level Martial King, follow me to the Lianyun mountain range and kill Lai Xan." Wen Ming had no choice now. Since Xiaoyang was determined to go, it was difficult to stop him. Therefore, the only thing he could do was to create an opportunity for Xiaoyang. They just had to hold Lai Xan back. As for the black fire, they could only leave it to Xiaoyang to suppress it. Immediately, several rays of light soared into the sky from within the mountain gate and continuously appeared around Wen Ming. After that, Wen Ming took the lead and charged over. After a short while, Wen Ming met Wen Yu, who had just returned. "Wen Ming, why did the black fire reappear? What exactly happened in the tomb?" Wen Quan was also very puzzled as he asked loudly. Now, Wen Yu also wanted to know what had happened and why things had turned out this way. In particular, his father's death had been a huge blow to him. Therefore, Wen Yu did not pay attention to his manners. Wen Ming said, "Brother Wen, it's too late to explain. Lai Xan released the black fire and destroyed the last strand of the true Lord's soul." Hearing this, Wen Yu felt as if he had been struck by lightning. In the mountain wheel realm, only Kirafire Soken was worthy of being called a true lord. He was like a god. Who would have thought that he would be killed by Lai Xan today? Kill that son of a B*TCH. Wen Yu said in exasperation. Then, the two of them led their men and rushed towards the Lianyun mountain range again. The Lianyun mountain range was no longer as beautiful as it used to be. This was because every corner of the mountain range was filled with black flames that were constantly burning. Now that black fire was in a hurry to recover its strength. It chose to attack the Lianyun mountain range immediately and was ready to devour it completely. Of course, there was a more important reason. It had been imprisoned here for tens of thousands of years, so black fire hated this place very much. Black fire's strength had increased tremendously because it had directly devoured many cultivators. If it could devour the entire Lianyun mountain range, its strength would be greatly enhanced. For a moment, birds and beasts were running away, but the black fire was like a nightmare that followed them like a shadow. They could not get rid of it at all and could only let their bodies disappear under the black fire. Lai Xan stood at the highest point, and below him were his disciples. Because Lai Xan was very warlike and ambitious, his disciples were the same. When they knew that they were about to conquer the entire world, they stood by Lai Xan's side. As for the living beings in the Lianyun mountain range suffering, what did that have to do with them? As long as they could stand at the top of the world, some sacrifices were inevitable. Moreover, they firmly believed that as long as they had black fire, even the god realm would be defeated by them. When that time came, they would naturally become the masters of this world. The black fire became even more fanatical in their eyes, making them seem as if they had fallen into madness. The fire of greed burned in their hearts. Chapter 1511. When Xiaoyang arrived at the Lianyun mountain range again, what he saw was no longer the beautiful scenery and paradise. Instead, it was a living hell. The black flames burned unceasingly, and countless ancient trees were also being destroyed continuously. Occasionally, he could even see the wails of birds and beasts. Even many human cultivators were struggling. However, their strength was not high. Under the power of the black flames, they were like ants and were quickly burned to ashes. Even those who were slightly stronger found it difficult to resist the corrosion of the black flames. They struggled to hold on, but there was nothing they could do to solve this problem. Xiaoyang's heart ached as he watched the creatures die one by one. Although Xiaoyang had never been soft-hearted when it came to killing, he would never kill the innocent. What the black flames had done was utterly heartless, causing many creatures to lose the right to live. The scene in front of him was shocking, and Xiaoyang's heart was also pained. In a fit of rage, he began to form seals, preparing to use the fire-controlling art to control the black flames first. After all, the most important thing now was how to deal with the black flames. It was imperative to get rid of this source of trouble first. Back then, Xiaoyang had promised the true lord that since he had accepted the inheritance, he would have to fulfill his promise and eliminate the black flames. Xiaoyang did not dare to summon Xiaohua in this situation. Xiaohua was now like a lamb in front of the black flames. In the end, it would only be devoured by the black flames and become nourishment. Xiaoyang, I've been waiting for you for a long time. You finally appeared. The black flames cheered at this moment. At this moment, Black Flame seemed to be agitated, and the flames burned even more fiercely than before. Of course, the purpose of the black flames was to remind Lai Exen, to let him know that his natural enemy had arrived. Because Xiaoyang had obtained the true lord's inheritance, Blackfire was naturally afraid of Xiaoyang after being suppressed for tens of thousands of years. It no longer wanted to be suppressed. Instead, it wanted to devour the entire world. That was the only way it could vent all the hatred in its heart over the past tens of thousands of years. Xiaoyang was also gritting his teeth in anger. Now, it seemed that it would be impossible for him to control Blackfire quietly. No wonder the true monarch said that this beast was very cunning. Now it seemed that this was indeed the case. Within a few breaths, Lai Exayan rushed over with the people from his mountain gate and confronted Xiaoyang. Xiaoyang, you're the one who stole my inheritance. Fortunately, Blackfire's eyes are very bright. He knows that I'm a wise ruler, so he chose me. Lai Exayan laughed arrogantly. Lai Exayan's injuries were almost healed. After killing Wen Chang Old Man, he was even more arrogant. Now he could feel that Blackfire was constantly growing stronger. It would only be a matter of time before it conquered the entire mountain wall boundary, or even this world. However, Xiaoyang in front of him was a bit of an eyesore. This was because Xiaoyang had the method to control Blackfire, which made Lai Exayan extremely unhappy. To Lai Exayan, this method was either in his hands or in his hands. The other option was to kill Xiaoyang and erase his existence from the world. Lai Exayan, if I die, the first thing Blackfire will do is to devour you, Xiaoyang said coldly. Lai Exayan shrugged indifferently and said, as long as I kill you and use the secret method to steal the imperial fire art that you know, that will be enough. As soon as he said that, Xiaoyang frowned slightly. It seemed that Lai Exayan was really naive. Did he think that the imperial fire art would be enough to make Blackfire listen to him? If that was really the case, how could the perfected lord have been attacked by Blackfire? Now that Lai Exayan had become fanatical because of his desire, he had even lost his own nature. It was probably impossible to wake him up. Therefore, Xiaoyang had no other choice now. Master, don't worry. I'm willing to submit to you. I just don't want to be mediocre. That's why I can't stand mediocre people. After all, I like to follow the strong. Blackfire also expressed its attitude at this time. Of course, this was only because Blackfire wanted Lai Exayan to trust it unconditionally. That was why it did this. Now that Xiaoyang was still alive, Blackfire had to borrow the strength of others to complete this task. Borrowing the strength of others to get rid of the only person who was a threat to it was the most important thing for Blackfire at the moment. Did you hear that? You're just trash. That's why you won't be recognized by Blackfire, Lai Exayan said excitedly. Looking at Lai Exayan's expression, Xiaoyang shook his head helplessly. Since he could not convince them, he could only kill all of them. That was the only way to tame Blackfire. In the next moment, Xiaoyang shook his wrist, and the silver lightning spear appeared in his hand. The silver lightning spear. Xiaoyang! So it's you, the Xiaoyang, who caused havoc in the Thousand Thunder Realm and killed Tian Bunu. Lai Xian said, slightly surprised. However, in the next moment, Lai Xian's expression became cruel again. So what if it was Xiaoyang? Tianbu knew was just an old man. It was normal for him to be killed. He was old. It was the same logic as when Chang old man who was no match for Lai Xian when he was old. Lai Xian, your opponent is me. Wen Ming's voice came from afar. Wen Ming and Wen Kuang were also rushing over. However, by the time they arrived, Xiaoyang and Lai Xian were already confronting each other. ****, I want you to pay with your blood, Wen Kuang said through gritted teeth. Wen Kuang was also a stage 8 powerhouse like King Wu, so he was not afraid of Lai Xian. In addition, with Wen Ming's help, there was no need for him to be afraid of Lai Xian. As long as there was no annoying black fire, Lai Xian was nothing to them. Xiaoyang, you just have to control black fire. Leave Lai Xian to us. Wen Ming thought for a moment and continued. People of Lai Mountain sect, listen up. Lai Xian has committed a heinous crime. This has nothing to do with you. Leave now and don't get involved. As soon as Wen Ming finished speaking, a black flame shot up into the sky and blocked him, Wen Kuang and the others. Looking at the black fire blocking their way, Wen Ming and Wen Kuang's expressions became extremely ugly. Although they were able to resist the black fire, it was not a long-term solution. Chapter 1512. However, Wen Ming's words were of no use because the people of Lai Mountain sect had already entered a state of extreme fanaticism. Their ambitions were not small. Conquering the world was right in front of them. Wasn't it a joke to ask them to abandon their choice? Therefore, the people of Lai Mountain sect would definitely not make such a choice. They even felt that Wen Ming and Wen Kuan were too ignorant. They actually wanted to go against the general trend. That was simply courting death. Master, don't worry about dealing with Xiaoyang. As for these annoying flies, let the servants deal with them, Blackfire said with a smile. Of course. Blackfire also knew that he could not do anything to Wen Ming and Wen Kuan. However, the others were his nourishment. As long as he became strong enough, these supreme experts would naturally be devoured by him. Hearing this, Xiaoyang's eyebrows furrowed even more. He knew that it was almost impossible to rely on the reinforcements from Mountain Wheel World to deal with Lai Xian. He even had a headache because of this. It was really not easy to kill all the people of Lai Mountain sect. Among the dozens of people, the weakest was King Wu, rank 6. Most of them were rank 7, which was the same realm as him. Especially Lai Xian, who was a rank 8 powerhouse. His strength was unfathomable. Moreover, Lai Xian was not the only rank 8 powerhouse. Xiaoyang held the silver lightning spear tightly and began to think quickly about how he could win this battle. Immediately, Xiaoyang took out an outburst pill and swallowed it. Instantly, his realm rose abruptly and he became King Wu, rank 8. When he sensed that Xiaoyang's aura had increased and that his cultivation level had risen by 1 level, a hint of surprise appeared in Lai Xian's eyes. He had never expected that there would be such a miraculous pill in this world. This was truly unheard of and unheard of. However, even if that was the case, how could Xiaoyang be a match for them all by himself? On the other battlefield, Blackfire's offensive was also very fierce. Wen Ming and Wen Kuei could only resist with all their strength. However, what Wen Ming and Wen Kuei didn't expect was that the Blackfire could even devour their spiritual energy, which shocked them greatly. Therefore, there was no way to defend against Blackfire's attacks. All they could do was slow down Blackfire's attacks. We can't go on like this. Wen Yi's chest heaved up and down as she spoke. Seeing the spiritual energy being devoured, everyone finally understood why true monarchs were called true monarchs. At that time, there were still many experts, but it was difficult to deal with black fire. At that time, only the true monarch stood up and turned the situation around with his own power, preventing the entire Mountain Wheel world from being destroyed. Nothing can happen to Xiaoyang. Wen Ming also said very decisively, Wen Yi was also aware of this, but it was impossible for him to rush in now. However, how to change the situation? They were like headless flies, without the slightest clue. You and I will fly around the Lianyun mountain range and rush in whenever we can. Everyone, rush in regardless of the consequences. We must protect Xiaoyang and fight for a chance for him. When Ming ordered. After witnessing Blackfire's power, everyone nodded subconsciously in agreement. They knew that once the calamity of Blackfire erupted, their mountain will world would once again fall into a state of imminent destruction. The only person who could change this was Xiaoyang. Therefore, they had to do their best to save their only hope. The last time the calamity of Blackfire happened, the entire mountain wheel world was united. However, this time it was because some people were blinded by their own interests, which was why there was so much resistance. Blackfire laughed disdainfully. These guys wanted to fight their way out of his encirclement. That was simply a joke. At least before Xiaoyang died, Blackfire would definitely not allow these reinforcements to enter the Lianyun mountain range. At this moment, Xiaoyang also made his move. Because he only had an hour to improve, all he could do during this period of time was to end the battle as much as possible. Otherwise, he could only continue to consume the outburst elixir, which would cause irreversible damage to his body. He had to end the battle quickly, suppress them. Xiaoyang roared angrily. The heavenly Qin mountain appeared directly and suppressed everyone. Seeing this, Lai Xan could not help but frown slightly. The pressure exerted by the divine grade magic treasure also made him feel a lot of pressure. Instantly, many of the disciples of Lai Mountain's sect felt the pressure. Even the mobilization of their forces had problems at this moment. In the next moment, Xiaoyang also performed the 7 steps of the barbaric steps. Every time his foot landed, the silver lightning spear in his hand would stab out without hesitation and began to take the lives of these people. For King Wu, a stage 6 powerhouse was completely insignificant in front of Xiaoyang. He could kill them in a single blow. Now that Xiaoyang's strength was equivalent to that of King Wu's stage 8, how could a stage 6 powerhouse withstand it? As for some stage 7 powerhouses, although they could block the first spear, they could not withstand Xiaoyang's killing intent. They could not block the second spear at all. Now, what Xiaoyang needed to do was to kill all these people as much as possible while the heavenly Qin mountain attracted Lai Xan and the other stage 8 powerhouse. When the last step of the 7 steps of the barbaric god was performed, Xiaoyang directly stomped a person to death. However, this speed was far from enough. This was because many people of Lai Mountain sect had gathered together at this time, preparing to resist Xiaoyang's attack together. In response, Xiaoyang also laughed disdainfully. In the next moment, he directly took out the airship and crashed it toward Lai Xan. Since the heavenly Qin mountain could not completely contain you, then what about 2 divine artifacts? When he saw the airship crash over, Lai Xan could not help but gasp. Who was this Xiaoyang? He took out 2 divine artifacts in one go. This was a bit too extravagant. However, they did not dare to be careless and could only resist. Otherwise, if these 2 great killing weapons fell, then all of their disciples would die. However, the 2 stage 8 powerhouses each blocked the attack of 1 divine artifact. But Xiaoyang was the biggest killing weapon. For a time, Xiaoyang also summoned his own magic treasure and began to bombard them. For a time, blood flew, and the powerhouses of Lai Mountain's sect fell one after another. Chapter 1513. Now Lai Xan's heart was in great pain. If he didn't stop the airship, many people would be suppressed even more when the divine weapon fell. It would be easier for Xiaoyang to take their lives. However, even if he forced himself to stop the airship, Xiaoyang was still crazily killing. Seeing the rancors that he had nurtured over the past 1,000 years being slaughtered by Xiaoyang like pigs and dogs, he did not feel good in his heart. At the same time, Lai Xan also knew that if he continued to be in such a stalemate, all the elites in his Lai Mountain sect would be slaughtered. When that time came, he would really become a loner. It could be said that Lai Xan didn't expect Xiaoyang to be so decisive in killing. He used all his trump cards as soon as he came up. Such a way of fighting was completely crazy, which was what Lai Xan couldn't understand the most. This guy is really a lunatic. The next moment, Lai Xan also shouted angrily, and his hand was constantly shining with light. Now he had to change the situation, so he had to do his best. At the very least, he had to save the lives of his disciples. Xiaoyang also knew that the time that the airship could delay was very limited. Therefore, he had to speed up. In this regard, he didn't hesitate at all. The silver lightning thunder spear was also constantly thrusting. Every time it was thrust, it was accompanied by the fall of an expert. Xiaoyang's spear technique had been greatly improved because of the inheritance of the True Lord, and he had become more familiar with it. In addition to the characteristics of the silver lightning thunder spear, the power of thunder and lightning attached to it was very lethal. Even if one spear couldn't kill, the explosion of the thunder was enough to damage the opponent's internal organs, causing them to be seriously injured and lose the ability to fight. After the cultivators who couldn't fight fell, the black fire would quietly devour them. At this point, Lai Xan's attention was completely focused on Xiaoyang, so he did not notice such a subtle change. Suddenly, the people of Fierce Mountain sect panicked when they saw Xiaoyang. This guy was like a killing machine. He didn't have the slightest bit of emotion. Every time he made a move, he didn't care about the consequences. This monster, what was he thinking in his heart? Every time he attacked, he didn't leave any room for maneuver. Could his strength withstand the exhaustion? Now, Xiaoyang's killing intent was also very resolute. He used the 7 steps of the barbarian god frequently. The Imperial Heaven Pagoda and the stately painting were also constantly attacking. This was a very mentally exhausting way of fighting. Even the consumption of energy was very fast, but Xiaoyang didn't care. After all, if he couldn't get rid of these experts quickly, he would only face more trouble. Only by being caught off guard would one be able to obtain the most benefits. The other powerhouse of the 8th level was the Supreme Elder of Fierce Mountain Sect, Lai Kong. When he saw these disciples fall, there was some fluctuation in his eyes. He was heartbroken. In order to satisfy the black fire, anyone who came to the Lianyun Mountains below the 6th level lost their lives. Now, if this part of the elites continued to be lost, then Fierce Mountain Sect would really have a gap. However, when he thought about the black fire, he felt a little better. Xiaoyang was really a monster. Under such circumstances, he could still show such courage and killing intent when he fought back. It was really rare. Moreover, his attacks were too sharp. Every time he attacked, someone would fall. Sometimes the gap between geniuses was huge. This scene in particular was a ghastly sight. However, they did not know just how much pain Xiaoyang had to go through to reach this point in his journey to become so powerful. Soon, there were only a few people left. However, Xiaoyang's attack stopped. This was because his previous all-out attack allowed him to quickly kill the enemy's strength. However, his energy consumption was very high, and he was even in a state of overdraft. Right now, Xiaoyang's vision was starting to darken. Evidently, it wasn't going to be an easy task to wipe out all of these people. However, Xiaoyang didn't give up. He didn't want to fall like this. For a moment, he directly swallowed a few bottles of pills. These pills were so precious that they could be sold for a sky-high price. Their effects were even more heaven-defying. However, he swallowed them as if they were jelly beans. It could be said that sometimes the war between cultivators was completely a competition of resources. Instantly, a wave of energy swept out like a river. Xiaoyang once again raised his spear and charged towards the remaining people. At this moment, the few people who survived the disaster felt dizzy. They originally thought that Xiaoyang was going to die of exhaustion, but now he attacked again. B****. At this time, Lai Xan's hands were supported by the magic weapon. He exerted all his strength and finally threw the airship away. Being able to throw the airship away was enough to show how terrifying Lai Xan's strength was. However, at this time, the silver lightning spear in Xiao Yang's hand also pierced the heart of the last person in King Wu's 7th stage. Xiao Yang laughed disdainfully. Because his whole body was covered in blood, the smile on the corner of his mouth looked a little evil. It rained from the sky, but it was red. It was a rain of blood. The blood rain poured down on the black flames. Seeing that his disciples were all dead and injured, Xan Lai was so angry that his chest was heaving up and down. This Xiao Yang deserved to die 1,000 times. All the elites of his Lai Mountain sect were here. He didn't expect that they were all killed by Xiao Yang in a moment. How could he accept this? Lai Xan felt that everything in front of him was not real. How was this possible? Even if there were dozens of pigs, it would take time to kill them. What's more, most of them were King Wu's 7th stage powerhouses, which was the same realm as Xiao Yang. Although they were in the same realm, Xiao Yang used medicinal pills to enter the 8th stage. Coupled with the difference in strength and magic weapon, there was a difference between heaven and earth. What's more, Xiao Yang also killed decisively because of anger. Every time he attacked, it was a killing move. Xiao Yang's situation was also very bad at this time. The serious overdraft of his strength made it difficult for him to support himself. Although the power of medicinal pills was still being supplied, it was simply not enough to make ends meet. Immediately, Xiao Yang smiled bitterly and took out a few bottles of medicinal pills and swallowed them directly. Chapter 1514. When Lai Kong saw Xiao Yang eating the elixirs like they were beans, his face turned extremely ugly. Could this young man be so rich that he could rival a country? Although he could only smell the fragrance of the elixirs, it was enough to determine that they were expensive elixirs. Even with his status as the Supreme Elder, he did not have so many elixirs. What kind of person was Xiao Yang? What kind of terrifying sect was behind him? The more he thought about it, the more Lai Kong felt his heart palpitate. Under normal circumstances, it would be an unwise choice to anger such a person. Lai Xan was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. All the experts in his sect had been killed. This was truly difficult for him to accept. For a moment, it could be said that his veins were bulging. Suddenly, Lai Xan thought about it. Could the reason why Xiao Yang was so powerful was because he had obtained the inheritance of the true Lord? Was that why he was like this? When he thought of this, Lai Xan's jealousy began to kick in. The person who was so powerful now should be him, not Xiao Yang. If I don't tear you into pieces, I won't be able to relieve the hatred in my heart, Lai Xan said through gritted teeth. At the same time, an extremely powerful aura erupted from his body. It could be said that Lai Xan was now filled with murderous intent. Between him and Xiao Yang, there was a blood feud. This kind of hatred could only be cleansed with blood. What a coincidence! I was thinking the same thing. Xiao Yang also raised his silver lightning spear and pointed it at Lai Xan. The true Lord's death and the Lianyun mountain range's current situation had caused Xiao Yang to be extremely angry. Now he only had one thought, and that was to kill Lai Xan. Beneath their feet, Blackfire was also greedily devouring everyone's life and strength. Therefore, Blackfire was quietly becoming more powerful. Wen Ming and Wen Kuei had also walked around the entire Lianyun mountain range. They had finally entered the mountain range. However, he was once again obstructed by black flame. He could only deal with it and continue to run, looking for an opening to charge in. It could be said that the entire Lianyun mountain range was now under Blackfire's control. It was almost impossible for the two of them to join the battle. It could even be said that under the ravaging of the black flames, many of their disciples had fallen and become nourishment in the end. It was just that Wen Ming and Wen Quan didn't know about this. However, their current mood was only to protect Xiao Yang. As for the other losses, they were completely willing to accept them. At this moment, news of the reappearance of the calamity of Blackfire quickly spread across the entire mountain wheel world. Many powerful figures from other sects also rushed over, ready to help suppress this disaster. The Black Fire disaster, tens of thousands of years ago, was recorded in the history books. Half of the mountain wheel world was wiped out, and it took tens of thousands of years to recover. It was enough to see how terrifying it was. Even some old fellows who had hidden themselves from the world or were waiting for the end of their lives came out of seclusion and headed towards the Lianyun mountain range. In the face of the calamity of Black Fire, the sects that had been in constant conflict also joined forces. That was because they knew how terrifying the calamity of Black Fire was. Black Fire was also their common enemy. At this moment, Xiaoyang knew that it would be difficult for him to wait for reinforcements to arrive. Therefore, he could only do his best. Only in this way could he carve out a path of blood. However, when he felt that Black Fire's aura was getting stronger, he felt very uncomfortable. If this continued, the consequences would be unpredictable. However, Xiaoyang also felt that his strength was constantly draining due to the excessive overdraft and exhaustion from before. It was difficult for him to continue. Even the explosive elixir, which took an hour to complete, seemed to be coming to an end. His realm could be described as being on the verge of collapse. Now, Xiaoyang could be said to be at the end of the road. In this hopeless situation, he was very unwilling to give up. When he felt that Xiaoyang's aura was weakening, Light Xan laughed out loud. He thought that Xiaoyang was really a monster. It seemed that the consequences of him going all out had now arrived. Die! Light Xan roared and threw a punch directly at Xiaoyang. Light Xan had a heaven-level upper magic treasure. Coupled with his all-out punch, the power was enough to make half of the Lianyun mountain range collapse. Xiaoyang could not dodge in time. He could only put the silver lightning thunder spear in front of him and resist with all his strength. At the same time, the Imperial Heaven Tower and the stately painting blocked in front of him. Under this punch, the mountain river map lost its glow and fell to the ground. The Imperial Heaven Tower was directly penetrated. Boom! Xiaoyang, on the other hand, was sent flying and smashed a huge crater in the Lianyun mountain range. Xiaoyang's body almost penetrated the entire Lianyun mountain range. He felt that all the bones in his body were about to fall apart, and the pain was also attacking him. His previous wildness had exhausted all of his strength. Therefore, he had to face a very real problem now. It was difficult for him to continue. At this time, the cunning Black Fire also came directly through the hole to corrode Xiaoyang. Now was the best time to kill Xiaoyang. How could Black Fire miss this opportunity? Seeing that the Black Fire was approaching, Xiaoyang furrowed his eyebrows and roared. Immediately, he activated the Imperial Flame art to defend himself. The moment the spiritual power appeared, Black Fire seemed to feel fear and retreated a little. After all, it was not Black Fire's body. It was still afraid of Xiaoyang. How can I die here? Xiaoyang also said, coldly. He had already felt that Light Xan had now sensed where he was and was ready to launch another attack to end his life. Xiaoyang took out another explosion pill. Although he didn't know how much damage this would cause to his body, he knew that if he didn't use it now, he would definitely die. Without the slightest hesitation, he directly swallowed the explosive pill. Suddenly, a very powerful spiritual power swept through his body. At this moment, the originally broken bones and tendons also began to recover. After a while, Xiaoyang also became energetic again, as if he had not gone all out in the battle. Xiaoyang's aura had also become extremely powerful. As he felt the power flowing through his body, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Then, Xiaoyang continued to swallow some pills. He knew that the power consumed when he went all out was immeasurable. Chapter 1515. In the next moment, Xiaoyang was in high spirits. Relying on the support of the explosive pill and many other pills, he also rushed out. It was just a battle to the death. What was there to be afraid of? Moreover, Xiaoyang did not want to die. Other than fighting to the death, he had no other way to live. When Lai Xan saw that Xiaoyang, who was on the verge of death after being punched by him, rushed out in high spirits, he was even more surprised. This guy was really a monster. Under such circumstances, he was still able to rush out. At that moment, Lai Kong had also broken free from the suppression of Tianqin Mountain. It could be said that without the worry of their own sect members, they were even more unbridled in their attacks. Are you a cat? Do you have 9 lives? Lai Xan also said in a flustered and exasperated manner. Everything that was happening now made him feel that it was a little unreal. Xiaoyang only sneered. Then, with a wave of his hand, he put away the mountain river map and the Imperial Heaven Tower. Although the 2 magic treasures were severely damaged, there was still a chance for them to recover. It could be said that if the 2 magic treasures had not blocked most of Lai Xan's power, Xiaoyang might have really been finished. In my opinion, it's just the final radiance of the setting sun. Sect Master, this kid is indeed terrifying. We must be careful when dealing with him, Lai Kong said with some lingering fear. What had happened earlier also made Lai Kong feel that it was unusual. He had lived for 10,000 years, but it was the first time he had seen such a stunning talent. Now that he thought about it, it was not unreasonable for the world-famous Lei Dingyin to die at the hands of this person. Lai Xan, on the other hand, snorted coldly in disdain. In his opinion, Xiaoyang was just a brat. Even if he had some tricks up his sleeve, so what? He would still not be a match for him. Since he was able to severely injure him to the verge of death with a single punch, it would be the same no matter how many times he came. Even if Xiaoyang was in the same realm as him, it was only forcefully triggered by the pill. He felt that his cultivation over the past 1,000 years was much more stable than the effects of that pill. Although Xiaoyang was very decisive when he slaughtered his disciples, that was only because he had the drive to do so. Again and again, and 3 times they were exhausted. Lai Kong, on the other hand, was looking at Xiaoyang with extreme caution. He felt that even if this was the final radiance of the setting sun, he still had to be careful when dealing with him. His current aura wasn't any weaker than before. Therefore, Lai Kong felt that even if this guy had used up all his trump cards, he could still launch a counterattack. You, on the other hand, only have 1 life, Xiaoyang said coldly while holding the silver lightning thunder spear upside down. 1 life is enough to kill you, Lai Xan said coldly. At the same time, his aura became even more powerful. Although Lai Xan was confident that he could defeat Xiaoyang, he did not dare to be careless. After all, someone who could slaughter his disciples was no simple character. Even though there were many factors involved, it was better to be careful. Immediately, Xiaoyang made his move again. With a flip of his hand, the Sky Qin Mountain and the flying ship appeared again. However, this time his target was Lai Kong. Since 1 divine weapon could only suppress 1 person temporarily, let's see if you can still withstand the attacks of 2 divine weapons. To Xiaoyang, fighting 2 powerhouses of the 8th level at once was a very risky thing to do. Therefore, he had to use 2 divine weapons to restrain the other person and create a situation where he could fight Lai Xan alone. Seeing the 2 divine weapons pressing down on him, Lai Kong was extremely shocked. It was really difficult for him to take them head-on. Lai Kong roared, and countless divine weapons appeared at this moment, forming a protective layer around him. Previously, Lai Xan and Lai Kong had been caught off guard, which was why they had spent so much time. However, after suffering a loss once, they had naturally learned to be smart. Therefore, he had to use all his strength to deal with the pressure of the 2 divine weapons. Lai Xan frowned when he saw that Xiaoyang was continuing to use his 2 greatest trump cards to control the other person. Immediately, Lai Xan threw out another punch. Since my previous punch was able to break your bones and tendons, then I can definitely do the same this time. Therefore, Lai Xan was very determined. With this punch, the sound of space shattering could be heard clearly. The wind from the punch was like a strong wind, making people feel as if they were being stabbed by knives and swords. It was very uncomfortable. In the next moment, Xiao Yang roared, and the silver lightning spear in his hand emitted a bit of light. He directly stabbed out with the spear. Suddenly, a tyrannical force swept out with lightning, directly colliding with Lai Xian's punch. However, compared to Lai Xian's punch, his attack was like air, unable to stop Lai Xian's attack. Xiao Yang's heart was also a little shocked. This guy was so strong that it really made people look at him with disdain. Soon after, a compass appeared in Xiao Yang's hand. Suddenly, a strange force was released, and Lai Xian's body stopped for a moment. The time compass had endless magical uses, but it was a pity that Lai Xian's strength was so strong that it did not have much effect on him. However, just this one time was enough. In the next moment, Xiao Yang directly used the 7 steps of the barbaric steps and appeared behind Lai Xian. By the time Lai Xian sensed it, the silver lightning spear in Xiao Yang's hand had already left his hand and pierced Lai Xian's back. Feeling the pain, Lai Xian let out a blood-curdling scream. His entire body shook, and an extremely powerful force burst forth from him. Suddenly, Xiao Yang's whole body was directly sent flying. His qi and blood were constantly fluctuating. He was injured by Lai Xian's protective genuine qi. Lai Xian did not have it easy either. This was because the silver lightning spear had almost blown his entire back beyond recognition. Even his spine was broken. Xiao Yang, on the other hand, sighed helplessly. Using the time compass was also very taxing on one's mind. Otherwise, if he was able to use a more powerful martial technique, he would have been able to severely injure Lai Xian if not kill him. After Lai Xian fell for hundreds of meters, he stabilized his body and used his spiritual power to forcibly reconnect his spine. He looked up and looked at Xiao Yang angrily. This little fellow really made people raise their eyebrows. The methods he used were endless, making it difficult for people to understand what else he was hiding. If I don't use my special skills, I won't be able to kill him. Wild Dragon Sky, Splitting Fist. Chapter 1516. Suddenly, the 2 fist forces turned into 2 wild dragons, constantly roaring and entangling each other. The power also became more and more powerful. Every time it rushed forward, it became a little stronger. It was as if it had an unparalleled momentum, and nothing could stop it. Looking at the 2 wild dragons, Xiao Yang couldn't help but frown. The power that erupted from it also shocked him. If he took this punch head-on, even if Xiao Yang's current physical realm had reached the level of half-step King Wu level 8, he wouldn't be able to withstand it. Even if he didn't die, he would probably be seriously injured, or even lose the ability to fight. Now that he had been completely locked on by the opponent's attack, it was almost impossible for him to dodge it no matter how he looked at it. Sometimes a high-level martial skill could lock on one's opponent, making it impossible for them to dodge. They could only forcibly take this move head-on. There was no other way. Xiao Yang snorted coldly. His expression didn't change. Suddenly, several halos appeared on his body. As long as it was a defensive magic tool, he would use it now. Except for the Imperial Heaven Tower and the Mountain River map, which were about to break, he used everything. He didn't feel the slightest bit of heartache. The silver lightning spear also left his hand at this time. Xiao Yang's hands also quickly began to form seals without the slightest hesitation. In an instant, a layer of halo appeared in front of Xiao Yang. It was like a leaf falling on a leaf, causing countless ripples. It looked very peaceful and quiet. The art of great teleportation. This was also the most suitable strategy that Xiao Yang could think of to deal with the enemy. Moreover, he didn't mind repeating the method of killing Lei Dingyin again. Although it was very risky and had a high risk, he couldn't retreat. This was the only way. In an instant, the art of great teleportation was completed. However, it was difficult to transfer all the power, so Xiao Yang could only casually strike, and the art of great teleportation left his hand. Suddenly, a wild dragon directly poured into the layer of magical halo and disappeared without a trace. However, the other berserk dragon had arrived. Xiaoyang was incapable of dodging it. All he could do was brace himself and endure it. Immediately, wherever the power reached, his protective Dharma artifacts began to shatter inch by inch. A disdainful smile appeared on Lai Xian's face when he saw this. Rumor had it that Xiaoyang was only able to do so because he had a lot of magic tools. If he didn't have any magic tools, then what was he? His strength was nothing more than the accumulation of these Dharma artifacts. The more Lai Xian thought about it, the more disdainful he looked at Xiaoyang. Now he seemed to be able to explain why he was able to kill Tian Bunu. Seeing so many magic tools being destroyed, Xiaoyang couldn't help but feel a little distressed. These were things he had accumulated for a long time. But fortunately, he didn't leave all of these things in Northern Light City. Otherwise, he really wouldn't have the slightest bit of strength to resist. When the protective light completely dissipated, Xiaoyang roared and also blasted out a punch. Immediately, the berserk dragon was also given a head-on warning. However, it only shifted a little, and its momentum weakened a little. In the next moment, the berserk dragon directly penetrated Xiaoyang's body and began to wreak havoc. It was ready to destroy Xiaoyang's life force. However, how could Xiaoyang let it succeed so easily? He let out a furious roar, and immediately countless hand seals were formed. His power was like a river gushing out unceasingly. Due to the support of countless medicinal pills, he could squander his power like this. It could be said that Xiaoyang was completely relying on medicinal pills to compete in terms of power. However, the fist intent was extremely ferocious. It was impossible to completely destroy it. On the other side, Xiaoyang finally spared a bit of energy to control the great teleportation technique and began to attack. In the next moment, the Tianqin mountain and the flying ship suddenly scattered a little. Lai Kong was stunned at first, but then he thought that Xiaoyang could not withstand Lai Xian's attack and was now exhausted. That was why he could not control the two god artifacts. However, controlling god artifacts was also very taxing on the mind. How could it be so simple? However, before Lai Kong could rejoice, he suddenly felt a slight spatial fluctuation above his head. A faint halo of light also appeared. In the next moment, Lai Kong almost felt despair because the fist intent that was like a berserk dragon surged out and directly hit his head. No. Lai Kong roared furiously. He had never imagined that the other half of the berserk dragon's sky-splitting fist's power would appear above his head. Originally, resisting the suppression of the two god artifacts had already exhausted too much of his mind and power. It was almost impossible for him to resist such an attack now. In an instant, Lai Kong's entire body was drowned by the berserk dragon, constantly strangling his life force. Seeing this scene, Lai Xian was also shocked. He had never imagined that this would be the result. The half of his fist intent that had mysteriously disappeared suddenly appeared at this moment and hit his own people. What the hell was going on? After being hit by the berserk dragon's sky-splitting fist, Xiaoyang's tendons and veins were broken again. Even his internal organs were full of cracks. It was as if his entire body was about to collapse. The pain did not make Xiaoyang faint. Instead, it made him even more awake. Now was a great opportunity to kill Lai Kong. How could he let go of such an opportunity? Suddenly, the silver lightning spear appeared in his hand. Xiaoyang turned into a bolt of lightning and charged directly at Lai Kong. Lai Xian also noticed this and immediately rushed up to stop Xiaoyang. Lai Kong and Lai Xian were related by blood. He was Lai Xian's grandfather. Therefore, how could Lai Xian bear to see his own grandfather die? Although the berserk dragon's sky-splitting fist was domineering, it was impossible for it to kill Lai Kong. Xiaoyang also immediately stopped moving. The corner of his mouth revealed a sinister smile. It was also because of the smile that the corner of his mouth lifted that black blood flowed out crazily. Right now, Xiaoyang looked like a killing god from hell. He was fighting a bloody battle and would not stop until he breathed his last. Seeing this smile, Lai Xian's heart was also very irritated. In the next moment, he seemed to have thought of something. He looked back and saw Mount Tianqin and the flying ship crash into Lai Kong, who had almost lost his ability to fight. Chapter 1517. Boom! Suddenly, the two artifacts collided with a deafening sound. Lai Kong let out a blood-curdling scream before he stopped breathing. First, he was hit by the Mad Dragon's sky-splitting fist. Now he was being crushed by two artifacts. How could he possibly survive? At this moment, he had already turned into a mist of blood, which continued to fall onto the black flames. Lai Xian roared furiously when he saw this. He finally understood that Xiaoyang's attack was just a feint. It was just to distract him. As for the real purpose, it was to kill his grandfather, Lai Kong. Those two divine artifacts were the most lethal weapons. It could also be said that if Xiaoyang did not have the two artifacts, the two of them would have killed Xiaoyang a long time ago. Why would there be so much trouble? The more Lai Xian thought about it, the clearer a lot of things became. Xiaoyang didn't have the ability to kill it all just now, because he couldn't continue. This guy is really cunning. At this moment, Lai Xian's eyes were bloodshot. He was completely enraged. All the higher-ups and top forces of Lai Mountain sect, except for him, had been killed by Xiaoyang. How could Lai Xian not hate him? It could be said that Xiaoyang had robbed him of everything. This infuriated Lai Xian so much that he wished he could skin Xiaoyang alive. Suddenly, Lai Xian's expression changed, and his aura changed drastically. He gritted his teeth as he glared at Xiaoyang. His breathing had also become much heavier. He knew very well that although Xiaoyang's combat ability was not as strong as before, with the two artifacts, he would not be a match for him. You force me to do all of this. Even if I fall into hell and never reincarnate, I will still devour your flesh and blood. Lai Xian roared every word out. Faced with such a tragic situation, Lai Xian could no longer maintain his calm. You asked for it. You killed the true monarch and released the black flames. Do you think your sins are small? Xiaoyang replied coldly. In Xiaoyang's opinion, these people deserved to die for helping the tyrant. Therefore, Xiaoyang did not show any mercy when he killed them. He was even very decisive. Every time he attacked, it was a killing move. Xiaoyang held the silver lightning spear and waved it again. He knew that killing Lai Xian was the most important thing at the moment. As long as he killed Lai Xian, he would not be stopped at all. He could go and tame the black flames without any worries. Suddenly, the power of thunder and lightning began to gather, and the light became brighter. Xiaoyang knew that he could not hold on for long, and ended the battle quickly. Moreover, the previous consumption was too great. He had overdrawn a lot of his strength. If the stalemate continued, he would really fall into a state of weakness. The power of lightning also quietly gathered on the silver lightning spear. It also emitted a sizzling sound, like the chirping of a bird. At this time, Lai Xian's eyes were red. He knew that Xiaoyang wanted to kill him, so he was ready to use his most powerful technique. Lai Xian's hands turned blood red. In the next moment, he hit his own chest. This action also caused Xiaoyang to be stunned for a moment. What exactly was going on? However, Xiaoyang did not hesitate because of this. He knew that Lai Xian had probably used some kind of secret technique to prepare to fight against him. Therefore, his attack did not stop. The Tianqin mountain and the flying ship also mercilessly crashed into Lai Xian. In the next moment, Lai Xian's pupils turned blood red. His entire body turned blood red like a burning flame. It was a shocking sight. Thunder dragons roar of 1,000 poisons. At this time, Xiaoyang had also completed his attack. The body of the spear shook, and a thunder dragon rushed out from the tip of the spear. It exuded an extremely powerful aura as it slashed towards Lai Xen. Now that there were 3 attacks, even if Lai Xen was a level 8 powerhouse like King Wu, it would be difficult for him to resist. However, Lai Xen had also undergone a mutation. He roared and his speed became much faster. He punched the Sky Qin Mountain. Suddenly, the Tianqin Mountain was smashed into a large crater, and it was sent flying. After bombarding the Sky Qin Mountain, Lai Xen also quickly kicked out with his foot. Immediately, the airship was also kicked away. Xiaoyang was dumbfounded by the sudden change of events. Lai Xen was so powerful. This was really frightening. What kind of secret technique did he use to increase his strength so much in such a short time? Even a divine artifact could be repelled so easily. Of course, part of the reason was that Xiaoyang was only controlling it with his mind. He did not add his own power, so the power was not as great as imagined. At this time, the Thunder Dragon arrived and directly penetrated Lai Xen's body, strangling him at an extremely fast speed. It wanted to destroy Lai Xen. However, Lai Xen stood where he was and did not move at all. He allowed the Thunder Dragon to wreak havoc on his body without even frowning. It was as if these attacks had no effect on him at all. Immediately after, Lai Xen reached out with both hands, grabbing the dragon's head with one hand and the dragon's body with the other. He allowed the power of thunder and lightning to continuously explode on his body, but he did not suffer much damage. Lai Xen roared and exerted force with both hands. The Thunder Dragon exploded and ceased to exist. Seeing the scene, Xiaoyang could not help but gulp subconsciously. To think that Lai Xen was this strong, this was truly unimaginable. With such strength, he was at least comparable to King Wu's level 9 existence. It could even be said that ordinary King Wu's level 9 might not be as powerful as Lai Xen. What was happening now was completely beyond Xiaoyang's expectations. This guy was a complete monster. Lai Xen laughed disdainfully and said, "You are indeed very amazing. Just now, I thought that you were relying on your wealth to win every battle. Now, it seems that your martial arts are not weak." Xiaoyang couldn't bring himself to be happy about Lai Xen's praise at all. Lai Xen said in a deranged manner, "Since you are so powerful, I don't mind leaving some side effects and using the fiery god's body of evil to deal with you." Lai Xen said in a deranged manner. His opponent had 2 divine artifacts. If he did not use his last trump card, he would probably die. Chapter 1518. The blazing divine body could be said to have been created by the Blazing Mountain sect's founder. It could burn one's own blood essence, fate, and luck to increase one's strength. Furthermore, the increase would be exponential, and it could even allow one to skip several levels. However, the higher one's level, the lower one's level of improvement would be. It could be said that the blazing divine body's power was very tyrannical, but the side effects were also very terrifying. Anyone who used the blazing divine body would face a regression in their aptitude and level. Even their lifespan would be reduced by a lot. These were all determined by the degree of use. The more one burned, the faster one would die. Even one's soul would be affected by this secret art. In less severe cases, one would be crippled, while in more severe cases, one would fall into hell and never be reincarnated. It was also because of these terrifying consequences that it was listed as a forbidden art. In the Blazing Mountain sect, only the sect leader was qualified to learn it. It was used as a last resort to protect the sect when the sect was faced with a great threat and could not deal with it. As the sect leader of the Blazing Mountain sect, Lai Xen was naturally aware of the terrifying consequences. However, at this point, he had no choice but to do so. From Lai Xen's point of view, Black Flame had already submitted to him. As long as he had Black Flame, even if he became a cripple, he could still conquer the world and hold it in his hands. The most important thing at the moment was to kill Xiaoyang, his only nemesis. Xiaoyang's brows furrowed even more when he sensed that his opponent's murderous aura was becoming more and more serious. He did not expect the situation to have completely gone beyond his control. If he were to fight Lai Xan now, he would be seeking his own death. It could be said that under the support of the blazing divine body, Lai Xan was almost in an invincible position. Xiao Yang's expression suddenly changed, and he asked, "Are you so sure that I'll die?" Lai Xan looked at Xiao Yang and said, "Even if you have the support of the pill, the strength of your power has become an insurmountable gap." The hatred in Lai Xan's heart made him lose his patience to continue talking to Xiao Yang. As he spoke, he started to move. After all, the longer the blazing divine body was maintained, the more terrifying the backlash would be. Therefore, he had to end the battle quickly. He was even more anxious than Xiao Yang. Now, Xiao Yang was no longer in a hurry. With a low cry, the heavenly Qin mountain and the flying ship appeared in front of him. With 2 divine artifacts, he was not afraid that he would not be able to block Lai Xan's attack. Boom! Lai Xan's seemingly ordinary punch contained extraordinary power. The Tianqin mountain was directly penetrated by this punch. Immediately, Xiao Yang was also shocked. This Lai Xan was really terrifying. However, Lai Xan's attack did not stop there. A hole appeared in the airship, and Lai Xan was still moving forward. Xiao Yang also immediately used the 7 steps of the barbaric steps to constantly change his body shape, making it impossible for Lai Xan to lock onto him. "Your time of death has arrived. Why are you still holding on so bitterly? Although I don't dare to fight you head-on now, you'll be gone in less than 10 minutes, Xiao Yang said calmly. Lai Xan snorted coldly. In his opinion, with his huge cultivation base and luck, it would not be a problem for him to hold on for 2 hours in the state of the blazing divine body. However, Lai Xan did not know that he had already planted the seed of death by forcefully taking the thunder dragon roar of 1,000 poisons. The blazing divine body was indeed very powerful. It could allow Lai Xan's cultivation base to soar without feeling any pain. However, it was precisely because of this that he was unable to sense any changes in his body. His internal organs were also constantly being damaged by the powerful poison. Although his murderous aura was also resisting it, there was no way to completely resist it because his continuous attacks were constantly draining it. It could be said that this was the magical effect of the thunder dragon roar of 1,000 poisons. The power of the thunder dragon was in the light, while the poison was in the dark, making it difficult to detect. Back then, Tian Bunu was very smart, but he still died from this move. Found you! Lai Xan roared angrily and punched Xiao Yang in the chest. After Xiao Yang was hit, he was like a falling comet. Once again, he penetrated the Lianyun mountain range and went deep into the ground. Even though Xiao Yang had used all his divine weapons and other weapons to the extreme, and even used all his skills, he could not avoid being found. After taking this punch, all the bones in Xiao Yang's body were cracked, and his internal organs were shattered. Fortunately, he protected his heart meridian with all his strength. It was also because Xiao Yang's body had been tempered to be tough enough. If it were anyone else, they would have died immediately after taking this punch. With the support of the blazing divine body, Lai Xan was this terrifying. Xiao Yang roared angrily and swallowed another explosive pill. Then he rushed out again. The two of them clashed once again. Now, Xiao Yang had even used his special skill. Countless amounts of poison surged out from his body. As long as he could kill Lai Xan, he could use anything. Since Lai Xan was willing to risk universal condemnation by using a forbidden skill, how could Xiao Yang cherish his life? Sometimes, cherishing one's life made it easier to lose it. Die. Lai Xan punched again and knocked Xiao Yang down again. However, the power of this punch was not as strong as before. Suddenly, Lai Xan froze on the spot. He had no idea what was going on. Why did his power suddenly weaken? Could it be that the backlash of the blazing divine body had arrived? Soon after, Lai Xan also discovered the problem. His internal organs had completely disappeared and turned into blood. Even the meridians in his body had been broken. Although the murderous aura flowed through the meridians, after the meridians were broken, there would naturally be some faults. It would be difficult to continue. Lai Xan could not believe it. What was going on? He really could not figure out when he had been poisoned. Although the backlash of the blazing divine body was severe, it would only burn one's blood essence and lifespan. It would not burn one's physical body. Xiao Yang lay on the ground and looked at Lai Xan's confused look. The smile on his face grew wider. The fiercer you fight, the faster the poison will take effect. Now, Xiao Yang had also taken out the fourth explosive pill. He was also hesitating. He knew very well that, if he were to eat it, it would leave a very serious side effect on his body. It might even be an irreversible effect. At this time, Lai Xan could not hold on any longer. His body fell directly to the ground. Chapter 1519. Seeing Lai Xan's body fall, it was obvious that his body had been corroded into nothingness. There was no way for him to continue supporting himself. At this moment, Xiao Yang finally heaved a sigh of relief. If he did not use the poison to destroy Lai Xan's body, Xiao Yang would not be Lai Xan's match even if he used all of his skills. Fortunately, he had kept a trump card of his own, which was why he was able to resolve this crisis. If Lai Xan had noticed this, Xiao Yang's plan would not have succeeded. Therefore, Xiao Yang's victory this time was partly due to luck. After hesitating for a long time, Xiao Yang also put away the power-up pill. He was ready to rush up and take a look. After all, if he continued to consume the pills, he would suffer an even more serious backlash. Although consuming one power-up pill at a time would not have any side effects, Xiao Yang had used 3 of them in this battle. Xiao Yang might be able to absorb the pill poison, but the damage to his body wasn't something that could be easily healed. At this moment, the remaining energy of the other elixirs also gradually dissipated. Xiao Yang also gathered his breath and directly charged out. However, just as he rushed into the sky, a layer of light screen blocked him. Looking at the light screen, he could not help but frown. What was going on here? Someone is still alive. It must be the people from Lai Mountain sect who killed these traitors. At this moment, a cultivator discovered Xiao Yang and shouted angrily. Instantly, this shout attracted many people to surround Xiao Yang. Every one of them was very aggressive, as if they wanted to tear Xiao Yang apart and skin him alive. Looking at the many cultivators, Xiao Yang's mind was in a mess. He was not very clear about what had happened when he was fighting with Lai Mountain sect. However, the 4th power-up pill had already appeared in his hand, and Tianqin Mountain was also faintly discernible. If he really had to fight, Xiao Yang would definitely not have the slightest fear. He would definitely kill his way out. I'm not from Lai Mountain sect. Xiao Yang said coldly. The silver lightning spear also appeared in his hand. People's hearts were sinister, so he had to be vigilant. Now, Xiao Yang could be said to be covered in blood. It was red and black, so it was impossible to see what he looked like. Now that Lai Mountain sect is like a vicious dog that everyone wants to beat, he naturally did not dare to admit it. In this Lianyun mountain range, who else could come out except for Lai Mountain sect? Moreover, Blackfire has always been cunning. It's possible that Lai Mountain sect's people to open a path. That's right. Lai Mountain sect's people are too hateful. Kill him. They are sinners for allowing the calamity of the Black Fire to resurface. In an instant, many cultivators began shouting as well. They looked as though they were ready to kill Xiao Yang. Every one of them looked furious. I'll say it again. I'm not from Lai Mountain sect. Xiao Yang repeated his words again. Being treated as a member of Lai Mountain sect by these guys, Xiao Yang felt very uncomfortable in his heart. One had to know that Lai Mountain sect had a blood feud with him. At this time, the cultivators' shouts also rose and fell one after another. Each of them looked like they were ready to kill Xiao Yang. They were also very ferocious. Xiao Yang lowered his head and saw that the entire Lianyu mountain range was wrapped in a powerful force, which prevented black fire from spreading out. Now he finally understood why black fire did not interfere in his battle with Lai Exin. It was probably trying its best to break the seal and did not want to be trapped in this place. Although black fire was very powerful and had high growth potential, it was possible to trap it by combining the power of the mountain wheel realm. Even if it could not destroy the seal, it could still be trapped. It could be said that in the battle against Lai Exin, if black fire were to help, Xiao Yang's chances of winning would also be greatly reduced. It seems that you won't believe me no matter what I say. All you need to know is that I'm the only one who can control black fire. If you insist that I'm a member of Lai Mountain sect, then don't blame me for being rude. Xiao Yang held the silver lightning spear, and his attitude was very domineering. Xiao Yang's situation was very bad. He did not know what would happen after he lost consciousness, so he had to ensure his own safety first. Kill him. Most of the cultivators also shouted at this time. They all took out their own celestial devices and were ready to fight Xiao Yang. At this moment, the silver lightning spear in Xiao Yang's hand also emitted thunder and lightning, as if it had sensed its owner's mood and was eager to fight. What's going on? A familiar voice sounded. Sect leader, when there are people from Lai Mountain sect who want to rush out. We are about to kill them. Sect leader Win, please hold the line and prevent black fire from escaping. An older cultivator also said. The person who came was Wen Ming. After being stopped by black fire, he knew that Xiao Yang was doomed. However, when he thought that the disaster of black fire could not continue to spread and had to be trapped in the Lianyun mountain range, he did not continue to go deeper. Instead, he gathered all his forces with Wen Ming and began to seal the Lianyun mountain range. Fortunately, the people from the Mountain Fire sect had appeared and told them about the formation that the Black Water True Lord had left behind back then. Furthermore, with the help of an endless stream of mighty figures, they were able to seal off the entire Lianyun mountain range, preventing the black fire from continuing to spread out. Otherwise, once the black fire spread out of the Lianyun mountain range, the consequences would be unimaginable. As for Xiao Yang's life and death, Wen Ming did not care about it. After all, with their abilities, although they could temporarily resist the black fire, they would still be devoured after a long time. Wen Ming looked at the bloody man and saw the resentful eyes with unruly killing intent. There was also some pride that belonged to him, and he did not want to explain to anyone. Suddenly, he thought of another person, the stubborn young man. Although he was seriously injured, he still resolutely killed his way to the Lianyun mountain range. He charged forward bravely without the slightest bit of fear. Xiao Yang! Wen Ming also exclaimed. Xiao Yang looked at Wen Ming and nodded slightly, saying, It seems that you have controlled the black fire. Very good. He is not from Lai Mountain sect. After Wen Ming finished speaking, he immediately opened a gap in the formation and motioned for Xiao Yang to come out first. The other cultivators were also stunned. Everyone's expression was very ugly, and there were even many people who were puzzled. They had never heard of Xiao Yang. How could he make sect leader when so excited? Chapter 1520. Xiao Yang did not stand on ceremony with Wen Ming. Instead, he rushed out. After all, it would not be good if black fire found a gap and rushed out. As expected, the moment Xiao Yang charged out of the seal, Wen Ming immediately stepped in and did not give He Hu the slightest chance. I didn't expect you to still be alive. This is great. Wen Ming was so excited that his voice was trembling. The only hope of the Mountain Will world was still alive. Just this alone made Wen Ming extremely excited. Originally, they were having a headache about how to solve the problem of black fire. Now that Xiao Yang was still alive, it was naturally possible. Xiao Yang just smiled faintly and put away the silver lightning spear and other celestial artifacts. Suddenly, he felt a little dizzy. He could not hold on for much longer after the previous few battles. It could be said that Xiao Yang was completely relying on his own willpower to hold on. The other cultivators looked at Xiao Yang with eyes full of doubts. Who was he? Why did he appear in the Lianyun Mountains? Wen Ming felt that Xiao Yang's aura was very weak, as if it would disappear at any time. Wen Ming's heart tightened. When Xiao Yang faced an opponent like Lai Xan, they felt that this young man would not be able to return alive. However, he managed to carve out a bloody path. Being able to walk out alive was already not easy. Suddenly, Wen Ming frowned again and said, "Where are the people of the Lai Mountain sect? Is Lai Xan still alive?" If Lai Xan was still alive, they had to be extra careful. After all, Blackfire did not know how to break the formation, but Lai Xan, who was King Wu's rank 8, knew how to do it. Moreover, this time, the elites of the Lai Mountain sect came out in full force. I killed all the members of the Lai Mountain sect in the Lianyun Mountains, Xiao Yang said faintly. Hearing this, everyone could not help but gasp. The Lai Mountain sect was so powerful, but they were all killed just like that? Moreover, the brat's aura was so weak that he was on the verge of death. A single Wu Zun could easily kill him. Wen Ming was stunned as well. Wasn't this a little too unbelievable? In the Lai Mountain School, there were 2 King Wu of the 8th stage and countless 7th stage. How could they all be killed by Xiao Yang of the 7th stage? Who would dare to believe it if he told them about it? How long can your formation trap Blackfire? I'm very tired right now and need to rest for a while. Xiao Yang didn't look at Wen Ming's shocked expression and said indifferently. Right now, Xiao Yang was almost unable to hold on any longer. Although taking the explosion pill again could allow him to recover, the risk of doing so was too great. When Wen Ming heard this, he also realized that Xiao Yang had reached his limit after the big battle. If he continued to forcefully endure, there would likely be even more serious consequences. This was the hope of the Mountain Wheel world. There couldn't be any problems at all. Since Lai Xan is dead, although Blackfire will become stronger, we are more familiar with the fire-trapping formation. It won't be a problem to trap it in the Lianyun Mountains for a few days. Wen Ming thought for a while and said. Xiao Yang nodded with a smile. Then he took out the explosion pill again and threw it to Wen Ming. He said, "If anything happens to Blackfire, use this pill to wake me up." Wen Ming took the pill. When he was about to study it, he realized that Xiao Yang's body had fallen. Right now, Xiao Yang really couldn't hold on any longer. He needed to rest. Because of Blackfire, he didn't have to worry about his own safety in the Mountain Wheel world. It could be said that only he could completely solve the problem of Blackfire. Those who wanted the Mountain Wheel world to continue existing would risk their lives to protect him. Wen Ming didn't hesitate at all. In the next moment, he flashed and caught Xiao Yang. Suddenly, Wen Ming's face turned extremely ugly. He could feel that this young man's life was hanging by a thread. Then, Wen Ming didn't dare to hesitate. He carried Xiao Yang and quickly left the Lianyun Mountains. Reincarnation Sect, Reincarnation Mountain. Wen Ming sat on the main seat. Wen Quan and an old man sat on the left and right of him. Below them were some cultivators of different ages. These people were all the authorities in the Mountain Wheel world. Because of the reappearance of Blackfire, they had gathered together again. Chief Zhu, at this rate, how much longer will we be able to control the black flame? Wen Ming also opened his mouth and looked at the white-haired old man on the right as he asked. Sect leader Zhu was the sect leader of the Mountain Fire sect, Zhu Tsungyan. There was a reason why he could sit on the second seat. The fire-trapping formation was the formation of the Mountain Fire sect. When the Black Fire first appeared, the people of the Mountain Fire sect had already left the Lianyun Mountains and started to set up the formation. Although the Purifier Soken had brought most of the things into the tomb, he had left behind some methods to deal with the Black Fire. However, many things were gradually lost in the baptism of time. It wasn't that the Purifier Soken had kept it to himself. Even the Imperial Fire technique was passed down. However, as time passed, some people felt that the Imperial Fire technique was useless. Therefore, no one continued to learn it. That was why it was lost. Now that the Black Fire has almost devoured the entire Lianyun Mountains, it's powerful. However, if we work together, it's possible to imprison it forever. However, we can't make any mistakes. It's not a long-term plan, Zhu Zhongyan said helplessly. When Ming nodded, he understood that Zhu Zhongyan had asked this question because he wanted to decide whether to use the pill to wake Xiaoyang up. Sect Master Wen, Xiaoyang's tendons and veins are all broken. He has overdrawn his strength, and even his soul has been injured. His physical body is the toughest I've ever seen. That's why he still has a chance of survival. If we use the pill he gave us to wake him up, the consequences will be unpredictable. The person who spoke was the #1 alchemist in the Mountain Wheel world, Zhang Miaoshou. When Ming sighed helplessly, he also knew what Xiaoyang's situation was like. Old mister, if you need any treasures, just say the word. Now that the Mountain Wheel world is on the brink of destruction, I hope that everyone will not be stingy. After all, Xiaoyang is our only hope, Wen Ming said helplessly. Instantly, all the other sects agreed. No matter what, they would give it to him. Although all the sects hated each other and fought for their own interests, they would put aside their prejudices when it came to survival. All right, thank you, old mister. We'll continue to guard the mountain range. Chapter 1521. Last time, half of the Mountain Wheel boundary was affected by black fire, and people were in a terrible situation. This time, because it was discovered in time, everyone was very united. Therefore, this disaster was controlled in the shortest time possible and did not continue to spread. Even so, the people of the Mountain Wheel world were still in a state of panic because they knew that this was only temporary control. Who knew what would happen in the future? Fortunately, Lai Mountain's sect was an exception. After witnessing Black Fire's brutality, everyone chose to stand against Black Fire. Every day, Black Fire would find an opportunity to tempt some cultivators, hoping that they would help him escape. However, a group of powerful figures soon found out and warned their own sect members not to believe Black Fire's words. Otherwise, if they fell into his trap, the entire Mountain Wheel boundary might cease to exist. Rumors about Xiaoyang gradually spread. Some young disciples were extremely shocked after hearing about it. He had single-handedly killed dozens of the top fighters of the Fierce Mountain School. This made everyone gasp in amazement. Even though there might be many coincidences, it was not easy for him to kill his way out alive. It could be said that in a short period of time, Xiaoyang's name had spread throughout the Mountain Wheel boundary, making many people yearn for him. Even many old guys were amazed. How could there be such a monster in this world? However, those in the court knew how difficult it was for Xiaoyang to win. It could be said that there was no part of his body that was intact. His injuries were so serious that even Sun Miaoshou was in a difficult position. He did not dare to say that he could be saved. It took 3 days and 3 nights to stabilize his condition. However, this only gave Xiaoyang a chance to live. Now, the various sects and clans had even offered up many heavenly treasures for Xiaoyang to use to recover. Right now, Xiaoyang was the hope of everyone in the Mountain Wheel boundary. He was the light of dawn that could pierce through the darkness brought by the black fire. Suppressing the black fire was definitely not an easy task. All the Almighty King, Wu Tier 5 and above were gathered here. They took turns to control the array formation and did not dare to slack off. After all, if there was the slightest mistake, black fire could escape. If the black fire continued to grow, it would be hard to say if they could still control it. But they also had hope, and that was when Xiaoyang woke up, then there would be a chance. However, as the days passed, Xiaoyang showed no signs of waking up. Wen Ming also held a meeting to decide whether to wake Xiaoyang up or not. However, they all said that there was no rush. Since the situation was stable, there was no need to take the risk. Xiaoyang's condition was too terrible. If they forcefully woke him up, there would be unexpected consequences. Then, it would be difficult to extinguish the black fire. When that happened, they would have to be even more cautious and then find other ways to extinguish the black fire. On the other hand, Sun Miaoshou did not feel the slightest bit of heartache. He used the heavenly treasures that he usually could not bear to use. Now he used them all on Xiaoyang. Whether it was pills or medicinal liquid, they were all poured into Xiaoyang's body. Furthermore, he soaked him in medicinal liquid every day to help him recover. Sensing that Xiaoyang's aura had stabilized and gradually strengthened, Zheng Miaoshuo's heart that had been hanging in the air finally calmed down. 10 days had passed, and he had finally helped Xiaoyang through the most dangerous period. It could be said that Zheng Miaoshuo was on tenterhooks every single moment. He knew that Xiaoyang's injuries were too severe. It could be said that he had lost almost all of his vitality. He only had a slim chance of survival. Many people were now very curious about what kind of monster Xiaoyang was. It was not easy for him to survive under such circumstances. As time passed, many of the Almighties in the mountain will boundary became more familiar with the super control formation. Wen Ming, and the other top Almighties did not have to expend so much effort. As for Zhu Cangyun of the Mountain Fire sect, he would only leave the Lianyun mountain range when there was a meeting. At other times, he did not even dare to take half a step out. This was because Zhu Cangyun knew how terrifying the Black Fire calamity was. Therefore, he did not dare to slack off. In the 15 days since the Black Fire calamity broke out, many people gradually lost their patience. They did not know when Xiaoyang would wake up. Wen Ming, and the other leaders had to appease them and ask them to wait. At the same time, they asked Zhu Cangyun if there were any other methods. However, many methods had been lost for a long time. Zhu Cangyun said that it was not easy to preserve the fire prison formation. After all, most of the methods passed down by the True Lord were used to restrict the Black Fire. They were not of much help in other battles. The fire prison formation was passed down because it was used to protect the mountain gate. On the 20th day, Xiaoyang was pleasantly surprised. He saw that he was in a large cauldron. He frowned slightly and immediately understood what had happened. I didn't expect the mountain will boundary to be so friendly. They actually used so many good things on me. Xiaoyang said as the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. As an alchemist, Xiaoyang naturally knew what kind of heavenly treasures were left in the medicinal liquid and the residual medicinal power in his body. It could be said that the amount of heavenly treasures used on Xiaoyang these days was enough to make several large sects feel the pinch. However, Xiaoyang did not know how high his status was in the hearts of the mountain will boundary cultivators. No matter where it was, people respected the strong. Xiaoyang had single-handedly killed his way out of the encirclement of the fierce mountain gate. This was enough to show his strength. Then Xiaoyang sensed it and realized that his cultivation level had also regressed. Because of the continuous use of the outburst elixir and his serious injuries, he was now only King Wu level 7. Although it was only half a step back from the 8th step, it was still not a small step. It could be said that Xiaoyang's cultivation level had regressed to at least level 5. It was only under the nourishment of these heavenly treasures that he stabilized at level 7. Although Xiaoyang felt a little regretful, he could accept this result. At least he came out alive. Otherwise, it would be useless no matter how high his cultivation level was. Chapter 1522. After a while, Xiaoyang heard footsteps. He turned his head and saw an old man with snow-white hair and a beard walking in with a benevolent look on his face. That kind expression was very real in Xiaoyang's eyes. It was as if he had saved a lot of people and was not faked. When the old man saw that Xiaoyang had woken up, there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. He immediately felt that he had lost his composure. He waved his hand and extinguished the flames under the cauldron. "I didn't expect you to wake up so quickly. Everyone in the mountain will boundary calls me Miaoshuo. Hence, everyone calls me Zheng Miaoshuo." The old man's voice sounded a little emotional. This was because, in Zheng Miaoshuo's opinion, Xiaoyang waking up so quickly had exceeded his expectations. Hence, he was so surprised and felt that it was unbelievable. However, Zheng Miaoshuo also knew that Xiaoyang's body was very tough. It was normal for him to wake up early. Thank you for taking care of me these days, Senior Miaoshou. Xiaoyang said. With a wave of his hand, he put on his clothes and walked out of the huge cauldron. Looking at the young man who had been reborn, Zhang Miaoshou's smile became wider and wider. He was smiling very happily, because this time it could be said that he had witnessed a miracle. Just by sensing a little, he could tell that Xiaoyang's injuries were almost healed. This could be said to be a rare and commendable point. He had to admit that this young man's recovery ability was really terrifying. They had paid a huge price, but now it seemed that it was worth it. I really don't know how you forged such a ferocious, beast-like body. If it was someone else, even if they didn't die from such a serious injury, it would be difficult for them to wake up in a few years. Zhang Miaoshou also said with admiration. This matter was indeed beyond his expectations. He also sighed. Perhaps this was the benefit of being young. Xiaoyang smiled faintly and cupped his hands. How is Blackfire now? This was what Xiaoyang was most concerned about. He knew that since the other party did not use an explosion pill to forcefully awaken him, but instead used a heavenly treasure to nourish him, that was enough to explain many things. Under the leadership of Sect Master Wen, in addition to the fact that the Mountain Fire Sect was not stingy with their fire prison formation, they had long suppressed it and completely trapped it in the Lianyun mountain range. Yesterday, I even received news that they are preparing to reduce the range of Black Flame's activities. Zhang Miaoshou also spoke truthfully. Previously, they were still having a headache over how to deal with the Black Fire. Now that Xiaoyang had awakened, this problem would naturally no longer be a problem and would be easily solved. When Xiaoyang heard this, he nodded in satisfaction. Fortunately, he still had this trick up his sleeve. Otherwise, the consequences would be unpredictable. I'm still very curious about the miraculous aspects of this pill. I've studied it, but I can't identify many of the medicinal herbs. Zhang Miaoshou also said curiously. It could be said that as the #1 alchemy master in the Mountain Wheel boundary, Zhang Miaoshou's research on pills was very profound. Even he couldn't see any clues, which really made people a little curious. Xiaoyang smiled faintly and said, Senior, why don't you try swallowing it? Since he had already awakened, there was no need to continue keeping the explosion pill. When he heard this, Zhang Miaoshou's eyes immediately became more passionate. Sometimes one could not reach a conclusion through observation. However, once one consumed it, one would definitely have a great experience and be able to comprehend the true meaning within. This might not be that important for those who did not understand pills, but it meant something different for an alchemy master. Can I really? Zhang Miaoshou asked excitedly. Xiaoyang nodded slightly and even made a light gesture. It was just an explosion pill. Although it was very precious to Xiaoyang, he still had a lot of them in his hands. When he was still an upper-level cultivator, he had already refined quite a number of explosive pills in order to prepare for any accidents that might happen when he was outside. Zhang Miaoshou looked as if he was afraid that Xiaoyang would go back on his word, so he directly swallowed the explosion pill. Suddenly, Zhang Miaoshou felt that his entire body was filled with power. The power in his body was also constantly growing, allowing him to break through the shackles and step into the next realm. Zhang Miaoshou's eyes were filled with disbelief. What was going on? This is an explosion pill. I refined it to travel in the pugilistic world. Its effect is to allow cultivators in the Qingwu realm to forcibly raise their realm by 1 in an hour. Of course, the good thing about this pill is that it doesn't have any side effects. However, if it is continuously consumed, seniors should also understand that your body might not be able to withstand such a consumption. Xiaoyang explained very patiently. At this moment, Zhang Miaoshou was also feeling the wonderful feeling brought by the explosion pill. Although it was only for an hour, its value was different. You relied on constantly taking the explosion pills to overload your body, and also relied on this to slaughter the Lai Mountain sect? Zhang Miaoshou asked in astonishment. Xiaoyang also nodded slightly. Even if he had a divine artifact, it would be difficult for him to fight against Lai Mountain's sect if he did not have the explosion pill to provide power. Young man, you are really crazy, Zhang Miaoshu also said with a sigh. Although the explosion pill did not have any side effects, everything depended on the burden that the body could bear. However, Xiaoyang obviously took it continuously. Even so, he was still able to slaughter Lai Mountain sect. Such a result was very impressive. Moreover, he was only in the 7th rank of King Wu. Senior, the black fire is more important now. Let's talk as we walk, Xiaoyang also said anxiously. From Xiaoyang's point of view, eliminating the black fire was the most important thing now. Although the situation had stabilized, they still had to be prepared. There was no room for slacking. After all, the more time they spent, the more variables there would be. Zhang Miaoshu said, "Okay, let's talk as we walk. You are not from the Mountain Wheel world, but you care so much about the Mountain Wheel world. I admire you." This was also the reason why Zhang Miaoshu admired Xiaoyang the most. Obviously, he could not hold on any longer, but he still kept the explosion pill to forcibly raise his cultivation to wake himself up. This courage was really admirable. Zhang Miaoshu was also glad that he did not do so. Otherwise, it was very likely that he would have destroyed this young man. Chapter 15:23. On the way to the Lianyun mountain range, Xiaoyang found out that he had been unconscious for 20 days. He was glad that he was not forcefully woken up. Otherwise, the consequences would be dire. Of course, the most important thing was that the black fire was under control. After the Mountain Wheel world found out about the calamity of the black fire, they were united and did not expose their own ambitions. They wanted to benefit from the chaos. Of course, the reason why the Mountain Wheel world was able to unite was very simple. The calamity of the black fire tens of thousands of years ago was recorded clearly. Therefore, no one dared to take the risk. If they were not careful, they might be consigned to eternal damnation. Once the black fire grew, the consequences would be terrifying. Half of the Mountain Wheel world would be plunged into misery and suffering. Countless experts would die. That was history written in blood. Who would dare to take the risk? There was another thing to be glad about. The Mountain Fire sect, which was passed down by Purifier Soken, had passed down the fire imprisoning formation. Otherwise, the consequences would be even more terrifying. If there was no fire imprisoning formation at that time, it would not be easy to control the black fire. On the contrary, countless experts came to control the black fire. However, they were devoured by the black fire. The black fire would only become stronger because of this. In the end, it would not be able to defeat the black fire. During this period of time, some old guys who had not appeared in the world for thousands of years came out of seclusion and joined the alliance. The calamity of the black fire was so terrifying. Countless people were terrified. The records of the past seemed to have been written with the blood of countless experts. How could this not be taken seriously? In fact, when the calamity came, everyone would put down their past hatred and work together to overcome it. Moreover, the calamity of the black fire was not a simple calamity. If it was left alone, the entire Mountain Wheel world would not be able to protect itself. When the nest is destroyed, no egg will remain intact. Therefore, under such circumstances, no one dared to let the calamity of the black fire spread. Instead, they wanted to nip it in the bud. They did not want to give it any chance. At the same time, Zhang Miaoshu was very curious about the refinement of the explosive pill. She asked Xiaoyang for advice. She wanted to know how to refine it. Since the Mountain Wheel boundary had given him a lot of resources, Xiaoyang told Zhang Miaoshu all the ingredients and refining methods. After listening, Zhang Miaoshu also expressed his gratitude, sighing at Xiaoyang's magnanimity. He did not hide anything at all. However, it was not easy for Zhang Miaoshu to concoct the explosive pill. The reason was simple. There were a few herbs that did not exist in the Mountain Wheel boundary. They were the specialties of the flowing cloud boundary. In the end, Zhang Miaoshu could only look at the ocean and sigh. He looked very regretful. Moreover, He also discussed with Xiaoyang whether some of the herbs could be replaced with others. If it really didn't work, he would find a chance to go to the flowing cloud world. While they were discussing, they arrived at the Lianyun mountain range. Looking over, the Lianyun mountain range that used to be filled with dense forests no longer existed. What remained was a scene of devastation. There was no sign of life, only scorched earth. Even the Lianyun mountain range was much smaller than before. It was obvious that the black fire was devouring the soil crazily. If the black fire could even burn the soil and turn it into its own nutrients, it could be seen how terrifying the black fire was. With just a glance, Xiaoyang could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Now he finally understood why the perfected Lord wanted to destroy the black fire instead of keeping it. Originally, he thought that the entire mountain wheel boundary would be devoured, or even the entire world. Now, it seemed that it was not an exaggeration. It was just that the black fire was not interested in ordinary soil. The main reason was that the black fire did not have enough nutrients, which was why it burned so slowly. If it was in a place with abundant spirit qi, how terrifying would the black fire have grown to now? This was simply shocking. Now, Xiaoyang's heart was also extremely uncomfortable. The black fire could not be left alive. After Zhang Niaoshou arrived, he had been tending to Xiaoyang's injuries on the mountain wheel boundary. When he first arrived, he only took a look. That was a scene from hell. The scene of devastation made him realize how terrifying the black fire calamity was back then. It could be said that because the black fire kept devouring the Lianyun mountain range, the cultivators of the mountain wheel boundary felt how terrifying the disaster that lasted for a few months was tens of thousands of years ago. It was also because of this that they were even more determined to save Xiaoyang. Because, other than Xiaoyang who received the perfected Lord's teachings, who else could tame the black fire? The perfected Lord's influence also reached its peak because of the black fire. Many people understood that the perfected Lord had saved the mountain wheel boundary. If not for the perfected Lord, how could the mountain wheel boundary exist today? Who dares to trespass into the forbidden area? At this moment, a cultivator noticed Xiaoyang and shouted loudly. The Lianyun mountain range was listed as a forbidden area because of the black fire. No one was allowed to go near it. If there was even the slightest mistake, the tiger would return to the mountain. Although the people of the mountain wheel boundary hated the black fire, they had to be wary of people with ulterior motives. Go and tell sect leader when that Xiaoyang is here, Zhang Niaoshou said calmly. The cultivator was angry when he heard this arrogant tone. However, just as he was about to explode, he saw the herb embroidered on the robe. He was shocked. There was only one person in the mountain wheel boundary who could wear this robe. That was the #1 genius doctor, Zhang Niaoshou. Suddenly, he remembered the name Xiaoyang. Looking at the young man, he frowned slightly. Xiaoyang had single-handedly slaughtered all the top fighters of Lai Mountain sect. He was so powerful that countless people admired him. Originally, he thought that Xiaoyang had 3 heads and 6 arms. However, now it seemed that he was not much different from an ordinary person. Why, am I very strange? Xiaoyang asked with an indifferent smile. The cultivator shook his head and said, No. My friend, please come this way. Since Xiaoyang was here, it was natural for him to meet Wenming. Moreover, Xiaoyang was their only hope. During these days, the powerful figures of the mountain wheel boundary had tried to extinguish the black fire. However, their efforts were minimal. Xiaoyang and Zhang Niaoshou looked at each other and smiled. Then they followed the cultivator. Chapter 1524. After Xiaoyang and Zhang Niaoshou arrived at the main tent, they casually found a place to sit down. As the core members were either resting or monitoring the fire prison formation, there was no one in the tent. In front of the black fire calamity, everyone was extremely cautious, afraid that the slightest mistake would occur. Not long after, when Ming returned, some of the people in charge were also notified one after another. If they could leave, they would all come. This time, Xiaoyang's arrival was an important matter for them to decide how to eliminate the black fire. How could they dare to be negligent? Xiaoyang, you're finally awake. You've made us wait for a long time, Wen Ming said sincerely. As the leader of the mission to eliminate the Black Fire, Wen Ming also felt a lot of pressure. As long as Xiaoyang did not wake up, he did not know what to do. Although he had tried some methods these days, they all failed. He could not come up with an effective method. However, it was different if Xiaoyang woke up. He had obtained the inheritance of the true Lord. Naturally, he had a way to solve this disaster. Xiaoyang smiled faintly and said, "Thank you, sect leader Wen, for helping me. Don't worry, I'll definitely get rid of the Black Fire." Hearing this, Wen Ming also smiled. Now he was most concerned about how to deal with the Black Fire. Xiaoyang's straightforwardness made him feel very comfortable. "When they're all here, we'll talk about how to deal with the Black Fire in detail," Wen Ming said with a smile. Xiaoyang's awakening also made Wen Ming heave a sigh of relief. After all, the burden on his shoulders was too heavy, and he was in a helpless state. However, now that Xiaoyang was here, there would be a huge change. After a short while, many powerful figures from the mountain wheel boundary came to the tent one after another after handing over their tasks. Soon, an old man with white hair and a beard walked in. When he saw Xiaoyang, his eyes became much more passionate. Under Wen Ming's introduction, Xiaoyang learned that this old man was the sect leader of the Mountain Fire sect, Zhu Cengyan. He was also the centenary grandson of the true Lord. After a round of greetings, those who were able to come arrived one after another and took their seats. After a series of introductions, everyone looked at Xiaoyang with many inexplicable emotions in their eyes. Even though Xiaoyang wasn't from the Mountain Wheel world, he had accepted the legacy of the true monarch. He had also taken out the pill without caring about his own condition. If the Black Fire spread, he would wake up. This made them think that Xiaoyang was also a part of the Mountain Wheel world. Immediately after, Wen Ming explained Black Fire's recent situation. Because Black Fire had been constantly devouring the Lianyun mountain range, its strength had also undergone a great change. Now it was strong enough to face off against King Wu, a level 9 almighty. Of course, this was only a vague concept, but the effect it caused was not as simple as King Wu reaching the 9th rank. Moreover, it was difficult for Black Fire to use its realm and strength to deal with Du Hong. Furthermore, Black Fire was even more difficult to deal with than King Wu, a level 9 almighty. Because of the uniqueness of Black Fire, it was very difficult to deal with it. After everyone finished speaking, they looked at Xiaoyang with great hope. It was up to Xiaoyang to decide how to deal with this calamity. Xiaoyang felt the pressure on his shoulders when he sensed their gazes. If he didn't step up now, Black Fire would still not be able to escape. However, it would be a hidden danger that could destroy the entire Mountain Wheel world. Sect leader Zhu, I've thought about it for a long time and have a plan to deal with Black Fire. I'm just not sure if sect leader Zhu will agree to it. Xiaoyang asked carefully. Zhu Cengyan waved his hand indifferently and said, "Grandmaster, please speak your mind. The big picture is more important." These words caused the corners of Xiaoyang's mouth to constantly twitch. The way everyone looked at Zhu Cengyan had also undergone a huge change. His words were really confusing. Since Grandmaster has inherited the true Lord's legacy, you are naturally the true Lord's disciple. According to seniority, Grandmaster is not too much. Zhu Cengyan explained patiently when he saw everyone's confusion. In that case, although Xiaoyang was young, his identity as the true Lord's disciple would raise his seniority by a lot. Xiaoyang almost spat out blood when he heard this. His face was full of embarrassment. Sect leader Zhu, this is not appropriate. I have never been master and disciple with the true Lord, so you can just call me Xiaoyang. Xiaoyang said helplessly. Everyone's expressions became much better when they heard this. Otherwise, if they were to be ranked according to seniority, they would have to obediently call him Grandmaster. Then, their seniority would be worlds apart. Zhu Cengyan just smiled and did not say anything. Fellow Taoist, let's get back to the topic. Wen Ming immediately said to break the awkwardness. Xiaoyang nodded and said, "My idea is to impart the Imperial Flame technique to all of you. Everyone must comprehend it in the shortest time possible. This way, when you face the black flames, you won't have to worry about being corroded and dying." Everyone couldn't help but exclaim when they heard this. Wen Ming's expression was not good because he had a different opinion about this matter. Previously, only Xiaoyang had the Imperial Fire Art, so he was the savior. If everyone learned it, wouldn't it cause a lot of trouble? At that time, if everyone thought they could control the black fire, the end result would not be good. But this is the legacy of the Mountain Fire sect, so I want to ask if sect leader Zhu agrees. If you don't agree, then pick some disciples of the Mountain Fire sect to inherit it. Xiaoyang said. In Xiaoyang's opinion, the Imperial Fire Art did belong to the Mountain Fire sect, but he wanted to be prepared in order to take down the black fire more securely. Tens of thousands of years of growth had allowed the black fire to have extraordinary intelligence and was extremely cunning. Naturally, it was not as easy to deal with as it was tens of thousands of years ago. Zhu Psangyan hesitated for a long time before opening his mouth. Extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. But I have one request. That is, the black fire will be handled by martial ancestor. After the catastrophe is over, fellow Taoists must not spread the Imperial Fire Art. Wen Ming also nodded with a smile and said, "Everyone, what do you think?" Everyone also began to discuss at this time. They were also considering the pros and cons of this matter. I agree. Yes, the Imperial Fire Art is only used to deal with the black fire. As long as we can destroy the black fire, we can do anything. For a time, everyone also responded and expressed their agreement. They also assured Zhu Zongyan that they would only rot the Imperial Fire Art in their hearts and would not spread it. Chapter 1525. Xiaoyang smiled in satisfaction when he saw everyone's generosity. The calamity of the black fire had yet to come to an end, and everyone should be united as one. Of course, the Imperial Fire Art was only used to deal with the black fire. Even if they learned it, it would be useless without the black fire. However, there is one thing that I will make clear. I will teach you less about the Imperial Flame Art, so that you won't think that you can control it and cause trouble when you face the temptation of the black flames. Xiaoyang said with a very serious expression. Xiaoyang had to think about this. As a rank 8 expert of King Wu, Lai Xan had a wide range of knowledge. Didn't he lose his mind under the temptation of the black fire? If they knew that he could control the black fire, it would be easy to deal with it now. When the time came and they really wanted to control the black fire, some people might not be able to resist the temptation. Suddenly, there were some subtle changes in everyone's expression, but they did not show it. After all, it was not easy for Xiaoyang to take out the Imperial Fire Art. Grandmaster, it's good that you did this, lest we cause trouble for the sake of benefits. Zhu Zongyan was the first to agree. In Zhu Zongyan's opinion, his ancestor could turn the tide because he was a true monarch, the #1 person in the mountain will boundary. None of them was a true monarch. Even Xiaoyang had to take a safe way to deal with the black fire, so it was better to be cautious. After all, people's hearts were sometimes the most difficult to control. In the face of a disaster, everyone would be united. But once everyone felt that they could control the disaster, no one knew what would happen. Seeing this, Wen Kuei also agreed, that's the best. In Wen Kuei's opinion, Xiaoyang killed Lai Xan and avenged him, so he had a good impression of him. Moreover, he still had the black fire to avenge him, and he had to rely on Xiaoyang. What's more, even if Xiaoyang wanted to hide it, there was no other way. If he wanted to force a confession out of him, it would be even more impossible. Xiaoyang was able to slaughter all the top fighting forces of the fierce mountain school in such a bad situation, so escaping from their hands wouldn't be too much of a problem. Wen Ming also nodded. With the agreement of the 3 leaders, the others naturally had no objections. Seeing that no one had any objections, Xiaoyang continued, "If it's just controlling the black fire, then it's easy. However, this was ultimately a source of disaster, and it could not be left behind. Therefore, I want to use my heavenly flame to devour it and completely destroy it." When these words were spoken, everyone's expression changed drastically. Black fire was an existence that even true monarchs could not destroy. Xiao Yang's idea was a little too arrogant. It was common knowledge that although the black fire could be controlled and reduced, it could not be destroyed. Won't this be self-defeating? Zhu Congyan asked worriedly. Xiao Yang waved his hand and said, "So I need everyone's help to severely injure black fire, making it unable to contend with my Lil Flame. In fact, I even need to divide it. This is the only way to safely devour it." Hearing this, everyone's expression became slightly better. After all, if black fire devoured Xiao Yang's heavenly flame, its strength would definitely increase by a lot. "If that's the case, please continue with your plan," Wen Ming said with a smile. Only Xiao Yang had the absolute right to speak on this matter. After all, whether or not they could destroy black fire depended entirely on his strength and plan. If there was a mistake in that aspect, it could leave behind a source of disaster. Until now, no one had thought of how to make use of black fire, so they had no complaints. I know from the true monarch's inheritance that there is a way to imprison black fire. Since black fire can't devour it in one gulp, I also need some materials, but they're all very precious, Xiao Yang said hesitantly. After all, he had to take the materials away after successfully refining them. He was still a little embarrassed to take away something from the Mountain Wheel world. Just say the word. As long as we can destroy black fire, it's worth it to pay some material costs. The Mountain Wheel world's overall strength has been greatly affected by the loss of Lai Mountain Sect. If there are any more losses, the Mountain Wheel world might not be able to survive, Wen Ming said worriedly. Sometimes, different places would go to war. For example, the Devil World had always wanted to take over the Flowing Cloud World and started a war. If Xiao Yang had not supported a new Devil Master, the Flowing Cloud World would probably still be in war. When Xiao Yang heard this, he also smiled. He also understood the pain involved in this. First, we need to refine the 100 Ice Chain. This item can seal black fire. In the true monarch's tomb, we use this item to imprison black fire so that it can't cause any trouble, Xiao Yang said solemnly. Hearing this, Zhu Congyan's eyebrows moved slightly. He knew about the existence of the 100 Ice Chain. It was naturally in the sect's inheritance. However, the 100 Ice Chain was difficult to refine and the materials were expensive. However, it was not very useful. Ordinary King Wu could easily break it. Therefore, the Mountain Fire sect did not refine it. He did not expect this item to be used to imprison black fire. Suddenly, Zhu Congyan thought of something. His eyes lit up and he said, "The second item is probably the frost wall, right?" "That's right." Xiao Yang smiled and nodded. Zhu Congyan smiled bitterly. It turned out that the true monarch had already left them a method to deal with black fire. However, he did not say it explicitly. Furthermore, they felt that this item was not very useful, so they abandoned it. Who would have thought that these seemingly useless items were actually extraordinary items used to deal with the calamity of the Mountain Wheel world? However, as time passed, the disciples of the Mountain Fire sect gradually forgot the purpose of the Mountain Fire sect's inheritance. They gradually focused on their own strength and lost sight of their original purpose. Suddenly, Zhu Congyan felt that he had let his ancestors down. They originally had a method to deal with it. However, they felt that it was useless and abandoned it. It even caused it to be completely lost. As for the 100 Ice Chain and the Frost Wall, he had only seen them in ancient books. As for the method to refine them, he had already forgotten it. It is not easy to refine these items. It even requires a very high level of skill. I hope to gather the power of the Mountain Wheel world and complete all these within 10 days, Xiao Yang said seriously. Although 10 days did not seem long, the calamity of Blackfire was also very terrifying. It could not be delayed. If there were more things, there might be some changes. At that time, if things were to blow up, it would be out of control. Chapter 1526. After deciding on how to deal with black fire, everyone discussed the details and perfected them. Then, they went to do their own things. After the meeting, Xiaoyang began to write down the materials needed to refine the 100 ice chain and the frost wall with the help of the true monarch's inheritance and memory. He also gave the list to Wen Ming and Wen Kuang. The two of them were responsible for finding the materials and refining them. Wen Ming also said that he would let all the skilled refiners in the mountain wheel boundary complete this task. As for the imperial fire art, Xiaoyang also wrote it down. As for the people who would cultivate it, this matter was handed over to Zhu Songyun for him to arrange. Of course, those who cultivated the imperial fire art were at least cultivators above the 7th level of King Wu. Only those who had reached this level had the ability to deal with black fire. Xiaoyang, on the other hand, was completely a hands-off boss. The reason why he proposed 10 days was very simple. His body's condition had not fully recovered, so he needed these days to stabilize his cultivation, to ensure that nothing would go wrong during the final battle. After the orders were passed down, all the sects in the mountain wheel boundary began to move. All of them began to cultivate the imperial fire art. As for the matters at hand, they temporarily put them down. Of course, they did not dare to be careless about the prison fire formation. After all, if there was a slight mistake, black fire would escape. At that time, there would be a lot of trouble. Therefore, they did not dare to be careless. Tsang Miaosho was not idle either. Xiaoyang also made it clear that he needed a lot of elixirs in case of emergency. Tsang Miaosho only needed to say a word, and all the alchemists in the mountain wheel boundary would contribute their strength. However, there were very few elixirs that could repair the soul. Therefore, he had to urgently refine a batch. Although Xiaoyang did this for the sake of preparation, he also did this to give Tsang Miaosho something to do and not disturb him too much. After 5 days, Tsang Miaosho appeared in front of Xiaoyang. He placed a storage ring on the table and said, "My friend, there are a total of 100 elixirs. All of them are here. Thank you for your trouble." Xiaoyang nodded with a smile. He didn't count the items. Since Zhang Miaosho was the #1 alchemist in the mountain wheel boundary, Xiaoyang was not worried about him refining pills. Zhang Miaosho did not have any intention of leaving. He sat down and said, "Look, I will directly use the yang energy of noon to refine the great yang energy. Is it feasible?" Now, Tsang Miaosho was still concerned about the refinement of the explosive pill. Every time he thought of that wonderful feeling, there was a kind of madness in his bones. He even went crazy. If he didn't personally refine an explosion pill, he wouldn't be happy no matter what. We can give it a try. This extreme yang qi is a specialty of the extreme yang sect. As for how we obtained it, I'm not sure, Xiaoyang said. For a moment, Zhang Miaosho frowned. He did not like such an answer. However, he still wanted to give it a try. "Senior Miaosho, I'll have to trouble you to find sect leader Zhu and call all the fellow cultivators who practice the imperial fire art over." Xiaoyang saw that Tsang Miaosho had something to say and immediately spoke. Hearing this, Tsang Miaosho immediately agreed. He could only leave reluctantly. Seeing that Tsang Miaosho left, Xiaoyang immediately went to the Lianyun mountain range. Now that everyone knew Xiaoyang, they immediately opened the array and let him in. "Xiaoyang, how long do you think this array can trap me?" Blackfire asked when he sensed Xiaoyang's arrival. Xiaoyang, on the other hand, immediately cast a spell to retrieve some of the flames and left. Not long. After Xiaoyang said those words, he turned around and left. In the end, Xiaoyang also asked everyone to shrink the fire prison array and reduce Blackfire's range of activity. After returning to the camp, half of the cultivators who had cultivated the imperial fire art were already in place. Immediately, Xiaoyang also told everyone his idea. Everyone also expressed their willingness to try. Xiaoyang also began to act according to what the true Lord had told him. He injected the black fire into their sea of consciousness and let them experience the taste of the black fire and overcome it and eliminate it. Because it was the edge of the black fire, it could also be eliminated. What could not be eliminated was the main body of the black fire. After doing all this, Xiaoyang also began to pay close attention to everyone's changes. If someone could not control the black fire, then he would help. A day later, no accidents happened. Several people woke up and eliminated the black fire. However, their divine sense was injured, which made them feel a little uncomfortable. After Xiaoyang gave them the elixirs that he had prepared in advance, he went to the fire prison array to get more people to adapt. And those who had learned the imperial fire art directly threw themselves into the Lianyun mountain range and began to squeeze the black fire's range of activity. Because of the imperial fire art, they were not afraid of the black fire's invasion at all. In addition, because there were more people and the help of the fire prison array, it was twice the result with half the effort. 5 days later, all the people who had cultivated the imperial fire art completed the trial. Among them, there were also a dozen people who could not pass. In the end, Xiaoyang saved them. On the other side, Wen Ming and Wen Kuei also brought the 100 ice chain and the frost wall, respectively. The 10-day agreement had arrived. It could be said that everyone had completed their tasks perfectly. The time for the decisive battle with the black fire had also arrived. Everyone also gathered together and began to discuss the specific plan to eliminate the black fire. Some of the problems in the details they had deliberated many times, hoping that there would be no problems. After all the problems were discussed, everyone felt relieved in their hearts. They had been worried for so long. The time for the decisive battle had finally arrived. Success or failure would depend on this operation. Because they had made a lot of preparations, everyone was full of confidence and felt that this time they would definitely succeed. After all, there were now more than 50 people who knew the imperial fire art. Their strength was above the 7th level of King Wu. With such a lineup, how could they not be afraid that they could not take down the black fire? 31 days before the outbreak of the black fire, when the first ray of sunlight shone, 64 cultivators were also distributed above the Lianyun mountain range. Every single one of them was ready for battle. Among them, 32 of them held a white iron chain in their hands. Their expressions were abnormally solemn. As for the frost wall, no one took it because it was placed on Xiaoyang's flying ship. It was cast into a secret room to imprison the black fire. Everyone's expression was very serious, and they were ready to go. Chapter 1527. After a period of hard work, the range of the imprisoning fire formation had shrunk to a radius of 10 miles with the help of many powerful figures from the Mountain Wheel realm. This made it easier for them to pinpoint the location of Blackfire's main body. Xiaoyang continued to wander within the radius of 10 miles, searching for Blackfire's main body. The other 64 people continued to shrink the range of the imprisoning fire formation under the command of Wen Ming, Wen Kuang, and Zhu Chengyun, preparing to force black fire into the smallest possible range. Looking at the Lianyun mountain range, which used to be incomparably huge, but was now reduced to half of its original size, everyone felt uncomfortable. It had only been a month, but the Lianyun mountain range had turned from a vast and endless stretch to a small hill. How could anyone not be moved by this? Suddenly, they thought of another problem. The Lianyun mountain range had also suffered from black fire once. How vast and magnificent was the Lianyun mountain range at that time? Xiaoyang, you want to control me? Impossible. All of a sudden, the black flame soared into the sky, roaring and roaring in front of Xiaoyang. As the range continued to shrink, Blackfire's main body also thought of breaking out. However, the encirclement was tight. Everyone knew the fire-controlling art, so it had no chance of escaping. Therefore, Blackfire's main body took the initiative to attack. The moment he saw Blackfire, Xiaoyang just sneered and directly used the fire-controlling art to control Blackfire. The moment Blackfire felt that it was being suppressed, it also began to go berserk and directly attacked Xiaoyang. Now that there was no escape, Blackfire also began to frantically counterattack. Seeing Blackfire rushing over, Xiaoyang's expression did not change. He stretched out a hand, and Blackfire's attack suddenly stopped. It could not move forward at all. The strong sense of suppression made it impossible to move at all. A total of 65 cultivators used the fire-controlling art at the same time. Even though Blackfire's main body was now comparable to King Wu, it was difficult to suppress it. What's more, the Imperial Fire art had a natural restraining effect on Blackfire. Even though they weren't as experienced and ruthless as true monarchs, their advantage in numbers could still make up for it. In fact, they might even surpass true monarchs. Don't you want the Mountain Wheel world, or even the entire world? As long as you are willing, I will submit to him. When Blackfire felt that he had lost the upper hand, he immediately used his best move. Benefits and status were tempting to every cultivator, especially to those who were fanatical about power. They were even more deadly. Blackfire was very smart. It knew very well that in the face of benefits, these humans would kill each other. When the time came, it could take advantage of the chaos to escape. However, everyone remained unmoved, and there was as firm as steel. In fact, there were quite a few people who were tempted, but no one stood out. Who would dare to stand out? If he could obtain the Blackfire, then he would be the winner. But if he couldn't obtain it and cause trouble, then he would be a sinner who would go down in history with infamy. For a moment, Blackfire couldn't help but feel despair. These humans who were blinded by benefits were actually unmoved. This was hard for it to accept. As the range continued to shrink, the pressure increased. Blackfire couldn't even move. It felt hopeless. Xiaoyang, I am willing to submit to you. I am much stronger than that trash heavenly flame of yours. I have a higher growth potential. Blackfire also understood the current situation. Xiaoyang was the backbone. As long as it submitted to him, it still had a chance of survival. It could be said that Blackfire's original body was indestructible. Since it had been imprisoned for tens of thousands of years, it wouldn't be a problem for it to remain silent for tens of thousands of years. Attack! Xiaoyang's reply to Blackfire was an extremely cold voice. Instantly, the 32 cultivators began to form hand seals. In an instant, dark clouds rolled in the sky. Blackfire's original body strength was comparable to King Wu's peak level 9 strength. Since it was so strong, it naturally had to be weakened to the minimum. This was the only way to have a chance to imprison it. After it was severely injured, Xiaohua could then have a chance to devour it. When it saw the dark clouds appear, Blackfire began to tremble. For a moment, it seemed to recall a high-spirited young man tens of thousands of years ago who charged at it with thousands of lightning bolts. The only thing that could seriously injure Blackfire was the power of lightning. Attacks from other forces would only become nourishment for the black flame, making it even stronger. This was the terrifying part of Blackfire. Although Blackfire was perfect, the only thing it was afraid of was the power of lightning. This was also the only thing it was afraid of. It didn't dare to be impudent. Boom! Boom! Bolts of lightning fell continuously. Because Blackfire was restrained, it couldn't move at all. Its body was constantly bombarded by the lightning bolts. Under the lightning bolts, Blackfire's original body strength gradually weakened. After a few rounds of attacks, Blackfire's arrogance became much weaker. During this period, Blackfire kept provoking it with words. However, it didn't have any effect at all. It could be said that this time Blackfire was completely at the end of its road. It begged for mercy because it knew that the alien fire could indeed devour it. Blackfire was indeed immortal, but it could be assimilated. This was what Blackfire was afraid of. The true Lord couldn't destroy Blackfire because he didn't have a way to deal with it. However, Blackfire's nemesis was in the hands of Xiaoyang. Although he couldn't fight Blackfire head-on, Xiaoyang could help. After a few rounds of attacks, Heihua was also seriously injured. His strength continued to decline at an extremely fast rate. 100 ice chains! Xiaoyang roared angrily. Instantly, 32 white chains pierced through the black flames, firmly restraining them. Now, even without the fire control art, black fire couldn't move. At this time, a wisp of flame appeared in Xiao Yang's hand and jumped excitedly. That was Xiao Hua. When Xiao Hua saw a lot of black fire, it was extremely excited. It rushed over and swallowed 1/3 of black fire's original body. Xiao Hua became even more excited and was ready to continue devouring. Xiao Yang immediately recalled it. One couldn't become a fatty in one bite. If Xiao Hua devoured everything, there would be a competition between Xiao Hua and black fire. If Xiao Hua lost, black fire would become even more terrifying. Therefore, it was safer to eat slowly. Xiao Yang summoned the airship and threw the remaining black fire into the cage.